All right, everyone. Well, we're thrilled to have you here. This is the Forge Summit preview, the Forge Summit digital preview, first one ever, inaugural. Hopefully, a repeat performance after a great evening tonight. Thanks for taking time out of your evening on this Tuesday to be with us. As everybody files on here onto the Zoom call, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Adam Josefczyk. I'm the co-founder and president of Forge Leadership Network. Now, I want to introduce you to two other great folks on here as well, my fellow Forge staff. But first, we're gonna have a networking event in a little bit. So you're gonna have to introduce yourself. You're gonna have to give your elevator pitch, as it's been called. But first, it's only fair if I introduce myself to you then. So my wife and I and our 1-year-old live in Lebanon, Ohio. That's about halfway between Dayton and Cincinnati. Spent most of my life in Ohio. Went to the University of Dayton. So my beloved Flyers had their record-breaking season cut short by that canceled NCAA tournament this year. Quite bummed. I found myself in the political world after college. I worked for a nonprofit. As a college missionary. Then I worked for different nonprofits in kind of the political cultural space. So advocated on behalf of life and religious liberty and different stuff like that. Spent a few years in campaigns and grassroots, and then also public policy full time. And at about the age of 25, a friend and I, Justin Powell, co-founded Forge in order to allow you to have the same types of great mentors, friendships, and network connections that we had been blessed to stumble upon, so to speak. So we'll get more into that. But Forge started 6 years ago, and it's been absolutely a joy to work on this and to serve all the alumni and new and prospective students like yourself. So that's a little bit about me. You can tease me because I'm a long-suffering Cincinnati Bengals fan. So anyway, plenty of self-deprecating jokes there, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Jeremiah Martin. You'll hear from Jeremiah a little later on about how to apply for the Forge Leadership Summit. Jeremiah is our COO at Forge. He's a Forge graduate himself, having attended the first ever Forge Summit back in 2015. Crazy that it's been 5 years already. Jeremiah and Emily have 4 kids. They're in Northern Ohio. Jeremiah serves our nation in the Army Reserves. He's twice been deployed, and like myself, kind of got his cut his chops on in the public policy world, the grassroots world, and more. And then the MVP of our trio is Jennie Simunek. Jennie is our director of logistics and events. So you'll talk with her as we get ready for the summit this summer. She makes sure everything runs just as well as possibly. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself later on. We're thrilled to have Jennie on the team. So the mission of Forge is our goal. This is what we spend every day doing, is to mentor, train, and connect young conservatives ages 18 to 25, helping you to impact politics, business, and culture. So our goal is to come alongside a young conservative who aspires to make an impact on policy and culture, whatever vocation that might be in, whatever specific career path that might be in, and help you find the mentors, the training, the connections, and the job and internship placements necessary to really get you on an incredible head start and help you do that the right way. So the vision of Forge, then, if that's the mission, if that's what we're doing weekly, monthly, yearly, the vision of Forge is twofold. On the one hand, we really want to be a catalyst for the personal and professional transformation and growth in your life. So we want to help through leveraging networks, mentors who have integrity and principles. We want to help you get a head start professionally, as well as continue to develop as a person And then on a macro level, from a different lens, Forge, if you're a sports fan, which you're quickly realizing this guy makes sports metaphors for about everything. It's true. If you're a baseball fan, you know that in baseball, the major league teams are only as good as their minor league talent development system. They call it a farm system. Well, the conservative movement, those people who advocate on behalf of limited government, life, freedom, economic freedom, the rule of law, the civil liberties that we hold dear, these folks, they need to know that there are young people coming up behind them with the skills, principles, and integrity necessary to carry on the torch or to kind of pass the baton on to. So we need a farm system for the conservative movement in our states. We want to be able to look back in 30 years and say that because of you and because of the impact that you're making, that any state in this country can look and know exactly where they're going to get their young talent from that's going to step into those leading roles in their state, in this nation. So we want to really replenish, improve, and expand the ranks of the conservative movement. Now, why are we having this event tonight? Why the Forge Summit preview? Well, as you've surely experienced, many of you are in college or recently graduated college, and I know it comes as no surprise to have me tell you that your last 2 months were disrupted of sorts, to say the least. Many of you who just graduated, theoretically graduated, I guess, from your own house, right? Or, were in your own house as you graduated. That didn't go according to plan. Well, it's been said that necessity is the mother of innovation. And for Forge, with this disruption of COVID-19, or the disruption wrought by COVID-19, we thought, what a better time, what a better opportunity to utilize Zoom, everybody's favorite, right? To actually have a preview, a digital preview of some of the highlights of what you'll experience this summer if you apply for and attend the Forge Leadership Summit. So the Forge Leadership Summit, we'll tell you more about that. It's July 21st through 25th. And we're thrilled that tonight will hopefully give you a glimpse into why Forge is worth your time, why Forge can have such a transformative impact on your life and your future, and why there's something special about Forge and the people who make it up, who comprise Forge. So we're excited. What's in store for tonight? You're going to have 4 keynote speakers who all make their impact in a different profession, but who all are in public life and are going to talk with you about how to navigate public life. And what they're going to talk to you about what they think conservative leadership is going to need to look like in this new decade that's off to a roaring start here, the 2020s. So what's conservative leadership going to look like in the 2020s? What role do we need you to play? And you're going to hear about their practical wisdom, some of their experiences, and more. So we're thrilled for these 4 speakers: Alison Centofante from Live Action, Congressman Mike Johnson from Louisiana, Shaun Alexander, who's a former NFL star and NFL MVP, and Dr. Jeff Myers, the president of Summit Ministries, who's a well-known speaker and author on worldview and cultural engagement. And in the middle of that, we're going to have a couple fun events to break it up. Jeremiah and Jennie are going to help lead you through a networking event. So we're going to have different networking rooms. Don't worry, don't be intimidated. It'll be very fun. It'll go very well. You'll be able to get to know some other people who you'll probably meet this summer at the end of July in person. So just view it as a head start. Then we're also going to have a question and answer, a little miniature interview with Jenna Powell, who's one of our most notable Forge graduates. She started off right where you are, attended Forge, and 5 years later, she's a state representative in Ohio, actually the youngest state representative in Ohio. So she's going to, Jenna is going to share with you her experience of Forge, how it's prepared her for the role that she serves in today in the legislature, what her friendships have meant in her life, and more. So we're excited about that. So that's what's in store. Thanks for being with us. We will have a break at some point too. So we are thrilled for this evening. And after having said all that, I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker. But first, I'm going to ask Jeremiah to just lead us in a quick word of prayer. It's important to note you don't have to be a person of faith a student of faith, someone of faith to attend Forge. But we're very much, the staff and the board are very much motivated by that. We feel like God calls people to love their neighbor well and seek the good of the city and the community and the nation in which he's placed us. So Forge is kind of an extension of that. Right? We want to be good ambassadors in the public square, in politics, in business, in culture, wherever that might lead. So Jeremiah, would you lead us in a quick word of prayer?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, and we just thank you for this opportunity to gather. Even though we are not together in person, we are able to gather digitally and have this time of fellowship and inspiration and encouragement. And we pray that your will be done this evening, and we will come away better for having been a part of this group, and may relationships start to grow and friendships develop even here tonight through the networking and through the Q&A and through this process. Lord, bless our time together. May it be productive and may it glorify you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, Alison, we're thrilled to have you, and students. Alumni, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Alison Centofante. Alison, some of you, our alumni, have actually met Alison in DC when she was with Alliance Defending Freedom. Alison is currently the Director of Strategic Communications at Live Action. And she brings over 8 years of experience in media, communications, PR. And she's been is a national speaker on life, marriage, religious freedom, and more. Has been featured on Fox News, ABC, NPR, CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, and in other media outlets, and been published in National Review, World Magazine, The Federalist, and more. She was named to basically every 30 under 30 list that you could imagine. And I know she and her husband are thrilled. They have a new baby girl, and we're so thankful, Alison, that you had to sacrifice the time to be with us this evening. Thanks for being with us.
Well, hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Like Adam said, I'm Alison. I am with Live Action. Just quickly, if you aren't aware of who Live Action is, we were started by Lila Rose. So usually I say Lila Rose and people know who we are. She started this foundation when she was in college, so that says something for you students. She saw on her college campus that there was a lot of things happening, but not many pregnancies. And so she put 2 and 2 together, went to her health center on campus and said, look, I go to USC, I may be pregnant. I'm going to college here, I may be pregnant. What would you do? And they said, we cannot help you with a pregnancy, but we can make sure you get an abortion. And so she was disturbed, and she thought, well, this must be an exception, a fluke. And she went to other campuses and eventually to Planned Parenthoods across the country and filmed her interactions. And she kind of did different situations where she was a young student, or maybe one time she was a young girl with a 31-year-old boyfriend. She was pretending to be 14. And instead of reporting it, they pushed her to get an abortion. So she started Live Action as a way to educate on what's happening in the abortion industry and catalyze the defunding Planned Parenthood movement to defund the abortion industry. So it's been an honor to get to work alongside her and our team. And this for our society is the greatest human rights issue of our time. So I want to just take my time today and tell you a few things. Number one, I've done programs like Forge, and I want to tell you what I got out of it and why I think it's good that you're here tonight and thinking about this. Then number two, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of this issue of abortion, because you are leaders and you are going to have to make a decision on this and speak out on this. So I want to prepare you. And then I'm just going to leave some room for questions, because let's be honest, that's the most interesting part of any conversation. So hang with me. If you have a question, please write it down, or whatever you've been advised to do, if you want to drop it in a chat or something, but I want to hear it. So I'll start here. Number one, it's awesome that you're looking into doing this. I can say that a majority of any success I've seen in the pro-life movement and anything I've been a part of is because of my relationships. I, as a senior in college, decided to intern at Fox News, intern here at some public policy institutes, Conservative Women for America, if some of you know, and just figure out what this world looked like. I got to see how news was made. I got to see how news was covered. And that was really good for me. There is no bad experience. If you are a part of an internship or something and you hate it, that's good. You now know what you don't want to do. And I would say still those relationships you build will carry you. You need people in this, whatever you're looking to do. I don't have the pleasure of knowing all of you like the guys do here, but if you're looking into getting involved in public policy, if you're into business, if you're into changing culture, you need people around you that are going to help you in this. Ronald Reagan has a great quote that you can accomplish so much as long as you don't care who gets the credit. And it's true. The success I've seen comes from people working together. So for example, we've planned events for thousands of people to show up at a abortion facility or at their members' representative's office within 2 days. How do you do that? You do that by having the right people to call and by having the integrity of your name. So if you're taking notes, I would write this down. Your name is everything, meaning your integrity is everything. So your ability in the work you're going into to execute on what you promise is huge. That's going to come from your time if you decide to do Forge or whatever you decide to do, which I know I will support you. These guys will support you as you pursue these endeavors, because if you can deliver on what you've promised, that will carry you into whatever career you're heading into. So prioritize that always. Moving from kind of practical advice, it's good that you're here, to the issue of abortion. I have dedicated my life to this cause, and so many have. And I wish I could sit down with each and every one of you and kind of ask, where are you at? Do you have any questions? What are the hard ones? And maybe you can share some with me tonight. But I will say, you have to make a decision on this, and you need to be educated. As young leaders that are going to be forming culture, law, public policy, business decisions, even just conversations, you need to know everything about abortion, because to be wrong on this is to be very, very wrong. And I like to quote Mother Teresa. She said, "Abortion is the greatest destroyer of peace." I'll say it again. Abortion is the greatest destroyer of peace. This was Mother Teresa, right? The woman who literally served the poor in Calcutta. She has seen the world's problems and poverty, and yet she says abortion is the greatest destroyer of peace. Not corrupt governments, not lack of food, not climate change, nothing else. Abortion is the greatest destroyer of peace. So I say that to you because if you're on the wrong side of Mother Teresa, you're on the wrong side, right? So think of that. Right now, the magnitude of this problem is what will drive us to have an appropriate sense of urgency. So maybe you see abortion as just kind of like this part of these other issues that we're talking about. And I want tonight to just raise it to the level that it needs to be. Right now, 2,363 babies are lost to abortion every day in our country. 2363. Remember that number. 2,363 lives are lost every day in our country. And right now, I'm talking to you guys during a global pandemic where we are counting, right? Every day, the news is telling us lives that are lost. And you've got a society that's saying, we care about each one of these lives. And that same sentiment should be applied to the preborn child. 2,363 lives every day. That's why when people say, well, Alison, don't you care about sex trafficking? Don't you care about these other things? Absolutely. I can't wait to end abortion and go work on something like ending sex trafficking. But the magnitude of the problem is the reason why you need to be a part of this movement and be really good at it. Be a good messenger with a good message. So that's on magnitude. Secondly, the hard questions. You have to go do the research on what messes with you at night on this issue. Maybe there's a question of rape or incest. Maybe it's a question of population and how do we support this many people. Those are questions I've heard. Those are questions that have answers. It's up to us individually to get those answers, and Live Action wants to help with that. So we've created a platform. It's called Pro-Life Replies to Pro-Choice Questions. So you can check that out tonight, Pro-Life Replies to Pro-Choice Questions. And you can watch like 3-minute videos. It's a little shorter than a TED Talk from experts across the country answering what we hear as the most common questions. I didn't say this yet, but Live Action is blessed enough to have the largest following in the pro-life movement. So we have over 4 million followers. We have over 1 billion video views. We're on TikTok and Instagram, and we're everywhere trying to change hearts and minds. And with that, every day we get to see comments and questions. So we took them, aggregated them, and got the best experts to answer them. So you're not alone, for sure, in whatever your question is. And that's there as a resource for you. Pro-life replies to pro-choice questions. You know, and at the end of the day, these are solvable problems. Death is undoable, right? So say you go, well, what are we going to do with all of these children? We hear that often. We need to be innovative. We are the grown-ups in the room. Human lives are not an appropriate payment for lack of creativity in public policy. I'll say it again. Human lives are not an appropriate payment for lack of creativity in public policy. So I want to challenge you guys to do it differently. And I've talked to some people who have been outside of the movement, are getting involved in politics. They're new on the Hill, or they just started their first job, and they go, hey, quick question, why don't we redirect funds away from abortion facilities into pro-life pregnancy centers in this way, with this avenue? Great idea. So many good ideas have come from people with fresh eyes. So if you feel like, man, I'm just not an expert on abortion, I'm kind of in over my head, I want you to know in some cases, that's a really good thing, because you have fresh eyes and you can ask different questions than everyone else is asking. So see that as a positive, think outside the box, and then propose that. I honor the old guard. You know, here in DC, as I sit in Alexandria, Virginia, there's an old guard, right? There's people who've been in this for decades, and we need them, and we stand on their shoulders, and we work so hard together. But it's really fun sometimes seeing when someone like asks a different question, is innovative, brings their experience. We have so many interns and new young hires that take us to the next level. You know, take our social media to the next level, are great at videos, are great at messaging in a different way. So those are good things. For you, if you're like, okay, what do I need to know? My 3 things. As a leader on abortion, you need to do 3 things continually over and over and over again. 1, expose the industry. 2, educate on the procedure. And 3, humanize the victims, both baby and mom. That's how we at Live Action make our decisions. Expose this industry. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry looking to profit off of women in these vulnerable situations. That needs to be exposed. You can find out more about that online. 2, educate on the procedure. The procedure is something people don't know about. Guys, I can't tell you. I'll tell you a story. I stood in Times Square in New York, walked up to a person and said, hey, listen, I'm doing a project on reproductive rights. Can I ask you a few questions? And they said, yes. So, okay, are you pro-life, pro-choice, or neither? And they're always like, I'm pro-choice. I'm hella pro-choice. Okay. Can I show you a 3-minute video? And you tell me what you think. And we show them this video that we've created at abortionprocedures.com, or you can go to anyonecanchange.com. It's a kind of a softer entryway, anyonecanchange.com. And you can see a medical animation of each of the 3 procedures. And it's completely medically accurate, something you'd see like at the Mayo Clinic, right? More of a cartoon. Don't think gory or graphic, more of a medical animation. And I was afraid. People were gonna take their headphones off, throw them on the ground, call me names. Not once. every single person watched the whole 3-minute video, and I waited to get their response. And they, across the board, took the headphones off and said, I had no idea. This is what happens? This is abortion? Wait a second, do our legislators know what this is? Every legislator should watch this before they talk about abortion. We should probably teach this in schools so people know. I didn't know. So I share that with you because, we think people can't change their minds. We think people have picked their position, they're well educated, they're in their corners of the ring, and we're gonna duke it out. Not necessarily, thankfully. Minds can still be changed, and educating on the procedure has been one of the best ways we've seen minds change. So that website again is abortionprocedures.com or anyonecanchange.com. And 3, humanize the victims, both baby and mom. There are 2 victims here. Always talk about both. We do that at Live Action by sharing stories, women who've chosen life, women who have regretted their abortions, and pursue healing. We're the side of healing. The other side can't offer that. And so we give grace, we give kindness, forgiveness, and we want to empower these voices instead of silence them and shut them down, which often happens on the other side. So, and I'll add one more, because then I want to take questions. One more thing, guys, you're not extreme for wanting to save all lives. So often I will hear when I run down to a rally or in a media interview, isn't it kind of extreme what Alabama has done in wanting to outlaw abortion? And I think, you don't often get the chance to give a whole dialogue on TV, but in this medium, I can explain to you that when you acknowledge that there's a human life there, I mean, in the same way that you would never look at an infant or a toddler and say, we can kill you. This is a human being, no matter where it is along in development. Humans beget humans. They don't beget another species. That's a human being. When you acknowledge that, you will want to save them all. And it is extreme to not want to save them all. Does that make sense? We are willing to compromise often in the pro-life movement and have legislatively, we'll meet you at 20 weeks. Can we save the babies up to 20 weeks? And that's a hard fight. How about heartbeat? We're having these conversations, but the end goal is to save them all. It is the most logical, the most compassionate position to take. So I want to take that out of our verbiage. I don't want to ever hear you guys or me or my team say it's so extreme. It's not extreme. It's logical and compassionate. It's the right thing to do for history. So I'll end there, and I would love to take any questions.
All right, thanks, Alison. So the way we're going to do questions tonight, we are using the Slido app. I have dropped a link in the chat. If you can't access the chat, it's forgeleadership.org/questions. So every speaker will have a question and answer time, and it'll be submitted through there. And so if you have your name in the Slido app, I will call on you. You'll be able to unmute yourself and ask Alison and further and future speakers your question. So the first question is going to come from Forge alumna Marina.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Alison, for coming and talking with us. I really appreciate it, and I really like to be able to hear from you guys, even though, we're all about doing our daily lives. We still get to hear from this. I think it's awesome. You touched on it a little bit, but I think one of the biggest, misconceptions is that, Christians are so rude, so harsh to women who are seeking an abortion, just not understanding. And sometimes I would agree that's true. And so how do you have any tips or just guidelines, I guess, on how we can be effective and still sympathetic to, understanding that this is really a hard situation for the mom and, being sympathetic with them.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. That's a great question. And it's one of the things that also breaks my heart, right? When you see people that go hard against a post-abortive woman. The only people who do that, I found, are people who've never talked to a post-abortive woman. So as soon as you do that and you're able to connect with a woman or maybe read a story or watch a video, I think that changes people's hearts and their tone and their tenor on this. So if possible, I would share a story of your interaction with someone who is post-abortive, or a link, or whatever the context is. But for me, when I see that happening, like on our platform, we do what we can to educate and say, hey, like even direct message, like, hey, I want to make sure that you understand there are two victims here. And I want you to watch this video of a woman sharing about her abortion regret. And I found that people are much more open to dialogue and compassion in that way, instead of being angry. I hope that helps. Sometimes it's just direct messaging a friend. Sometimes it's showing a video. Or I encourage you, like if you know someone in your family, you probably do. We all have a friend or a family member who's post-abortive. Say, yeah, that's really harsh. I don't think you'd actually say that to her. And I would challenge you to talk to someone who's actually been through this. So that's my answer, is just shining a light on more stories, because the odds are they probably haven't heard one.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. The next question, it doesn't have a name here, so I can't call on them. But it says, has Live Action faced any bullying or legal pushback like what they experienced at Centers for Medical Progress?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And it'll take a while, but I'll be brief in that, yes, we've dealt with issues of suppression, both on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram's the only one that's still friendly, like really good. Instagram's been good to us. Thankfully, because we have a big platform, we've been able to address some of those, fix some of the problems, not all of them. Right now, for example, on Twitter, we are not able to advertise our message. So we can post, but we can't do any advertising, even though Planned Parenthood can. And we have emails from Twitter representatives saying it's because we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood. It's because we talk about abortion. So it's crazy, and we're still fighting it. But that's another issue that the pro-life movement is dealing with, is suppression and censorship. And how to lead on that is just to say, look, like, we aren't asking for any special favors. We're asking for equal treatment. We've had members of Congress come to our aid on that, on both sides, just because we need more conversation, not less. And, they kind of only mess with us as the pro-life movement. They don't do it to the other side. They never step into an issue of, I say, immigration or gun control and say, this side's right, this side's wrong. Maybe they do, and I'm just not tracking. They probably do, but it's not okay. And we're fighting back and making a very loud noise. I will say, guys, on this issue, just highlight the legitimate stories. It's really easy for us as conservatives. You guys have seen it. Aunt Teresa says, no one liked my recent post. I must be suppressed. I shared a picture of an American flag and no one liked it. So I'm saying that in all honesty, be careful. Vet it out, look at the research. Live Action always documents everything from screenshots to emails to conversations to prove we've really fought the good fight. We've tried to follow the rules and the standards of each platform, and we're still being suppressed. So I'd like to see us slow down on yelling suppression so often, because if it's not legitimate, it really hurts the cause. So, maybe Aunt Teresa was suppressed, but sometimes it's just not the best content.
All right, one final question from Bergen.
Hi, Alison. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. As someone who wants to aspire to work on the Hill someday, how do you remain steadfast in your faith and your convictions and still care for the individual? I feel like it's just really hard to integrate the two and to do that and to steward that well. So what advice would you have for someone who's considering policy on the national stage and to care for each individual while remaining steadfast in your convictions? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, and cool name. I like it. I just had a baby, so I'm really aware of names. I'm always like, could I steal that one day? So great question. And actually, I kind of want to flip the script for you. So I think people think like you're going to get into a hard job and like it's going to be busy. And how do you stay faithful, right? In like reading your Bible, praying, like being close to God. And I want to flip it because I found that especially in this arena of public policy, it is hard. It is a grind. I mean, you're working really, really hard on hard issues, but you'll see that every day there's a forest fire. Every day there's something going on. And I found that that drives me to my faith more than if I was home and bored. Like if I was home and like bored and not like doing anything, you're not really drawn to lean on God or ask what the heck is going on. I can't tell you how many times I walked around DC, walked around the White House or Capitol and been like, God, what the heck? Just end it. Just make it stop. Make abortion stop. Like help people, you know, and you're pleading. That is so good for your soul and your relationship with God. When you're, you know, you, Birjan, you spend a day or weeks or months on a project and then it gets derailed out of some political thing, you're going to realize that the battle is not won here. God is a part of what you're doing, but he cares a lot about how you're doing it and the way that you're showing other people why you're doing it. Right? Like I can't get defeated that again, today, 2,363 babies' lives were lost. When I look at my little girl, that is sad. But there's something, it draws me to the Lord to say, you are in control. I give my time, my talents over to you. Let me be a part of it. Like, let me be a part of this great co-mission with Christ, right? The Great Commission, it's a co-mission. So I hope I'm articulating that well, that there's something about the not just the grind, but your hope, and you know this, your hope is not in politics. Your hope is not in these politicians. So every day you're reminded of that because they're broken people. They fail, you fail, but that's okay because you have the Lord and you know that your hope is not in them or even in yourself, but that God's using you as a part of something bigger. So I wouldn't fear that. Actually, I think you should look forward to the way, like, in times of duress, you will be called to God, or you'll notice on a positive thing, I'll end here, you'll notice like God at work. Like I can't tell you, there's been conversations that have been had in elevators that changed the course of history. There's been meetings, you know, in ladies' rooms where you have a conversation and it changes a vote, and it's one vote and that's what mattered. And when you get to see that, like that to me is like a God wink. God's like, hey, remember me? Like I'm here. You're not alone. I ordain your path. You plan your steps, but I ordained, you know, you running into them in the hallway. And so look for those and then write them down because it's really cool to remember.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Alison. We're so appreciative that you're here tonight, and I'm always glad when I get a chance to hear from you. So we're going to move into the networking portion of this. And so I just let you know, I'm Jennie Simunek, and I'm the logistics and events coordinator for Forge Leadership Network. And so we have about 20 minutes now to spend some time networking with some other prospective Summit students and some Forge alumni who've joined us tonight. So just to let you know, during the Summit, we do an activity called speed networking as opposed to speed dating on the first day, so everyone can get a chance to meet each other in a fun way. So tonight, first I'll explain what an elevator speech or elevator pitch is, and second, we'll break into groups where you can practice networking using your elevator speech. And then after our 20 minutes is up, we'll come back together and hear from Congressman Mike Johnson. So an elevator speech is a quick summary of your background. It's about 30 to 60 seconds long, short enough to present during a brief elevator ride. So to be successful, it must be interesting and compelling enough to draw people in and wanting to know more, wanting to take your business card and call you back for further conversations or perhaps an interview. So here's what you want to do. You want to say who you are, what you do, and what you want to achieve. And I'll repeat that. You want to say who you are, what you do, and what you want to achieve. So the goal is to be precise and not ramble on, while at the same time try to not sound too rehearsed. So I'll give you an example. Here's my elevator speech. Hi, I'm Jennie Simunek. I'm a former CIA analyst during the Reagan administration, and my focus was on Soviet missiles and space programs. I also helped start a Christian school in Eastern Cincinnati and then taught high school history and government for about 15 years. And currently I'm the event planner for Forge Leadership Network, a training and mentoring organization working with young conservatives to impact business, politics, and the culture. So as the event coordinator, please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. So with that, I hooked you a little bit with my background, and maybe during the summer I can tell you a little bit more about what I did with the CIA. And so I told you what I do, and I want people to know that I'm the person to come to with any issues or to tell us how great the event is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to break into groups. If you're ready to do that, Jeremiah.
All right, so we're getting back into the main group. This is something that we have never tried before, but we wanted everyone to have an opportunity to at least get to know some of the people in the group. And so it's not, our goal was not to make this just another webinar, but rather as interactive as possible in a digital medium. So, of course, just a reminder, as we get into our speakers, you can go to the link in the questions to ask your questions to any speakers. I will be moderating. I'll be moderating those, as well as there are reactions that you can choose, either applause or thumbs up, to give the speakers feedback as they are going along. Feel free to use those. Feel free to use the chat. Ask questions, get engaged. We are all learning together, and we really appreciate everyone joining us. And so, Adam, are you on?
Thanks, everyone. Well, I'm really excited to introduce you to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Congressman Mike Johnson. He's a Republican member of Congress who proudly serves Louisiana's 4th District. With nearly 2 decades of experience in constitutional law, Congressman Johnson has been appointed to the House Judiciary Committee and named a ranking member for one of its subcommittees, the Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. Recently, for the 116th Congress, Congressman Johnson was elected by his colleagues and peers to serve as chairman of the Republican Study Committee, known as the RSC, which is the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress. Mike is a dedicated husband and father to 4 children. Congressman Johnson, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be with y'all. Thanks for the opportunity, Adam. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think I'm supposed to share for a couple minutes and then maybe take questions or what have you. But I was able to speak to this same group maybe a year ago or so. Dan Ziegler, who's the executive director of the RSC, used to be very involved with all this, as you know, and he had me come in and speak to the group. And I was so impressed with the group that was assembled that last time over at Heritage. And I know that you got a lot of new folks on this call, I'm sure, but I just expressed for a couple minutes what I shared with that group, and I just got off 20 minutes ago with a nationwide call with Students for Life, similar group. They're doing a lot of good work right now, and trying to encourage them in the same way that I would all of you, and that is just to say that this has never been more needed than it is right now. These youth leadership movements. I say youth, I mean younger people like that. Because we're in uncharted waters in so many ways in the country. And we were before the pandemic, but now certainly coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, there's almost kind of a reset around the country in so many ways on so many things. And rewinding a little bit back to before the pandemic struck, when I ran for chairman of the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives on Capitol Hill. We got 148 members in the House, and this is the group that's been referred to since its founding in 1973 as the intellectual arsenal of conservatism in the House. And I ran for chairman, and I kind of made this explanation, this pitch to my colleagues. And I said, look, I know I'm not the most senior guy here, but I'm going to state the obvious, what many of us can see and understand with our own eyes. And that is that we were already entering choppy seas and uncharted waters in so many ways. We're in the Trump era, and a lot of things have changed. And I said, a lot of conservatives and even people who are really animated in 2016 to come out and elect this president and to advance many of these ideas, if you stop a lot of conservatives and you ask them to identify and define what it means to be a conservative, you get some surprising answers. The point being that we, in many ways, we've kind of lost our fixed points on the horizon, so to speak. I'm from Louisiana. I'm from the north part of the state, but we're a coastal state. And in Louisiana, everything's explained in either a hurricane or a football metaphor. Okay, that's how we just understand the world. And I using the hurricane metaphor, I just explained that the way I see this is that we're entering some dangerous waters. We were, and at that time, pre-pandemic. And I said, we need to calibrate where we are as we go into the new Congress, the 116th Congress, which started, last January. I said, we have got to be able to articulate and really communicate with consistency and conviction what it means to be a conservative. Why are we different than the other side? And what is it that we ostensibly stand for? And I said, hearkening back to Reagan, as we often do on so many of these things, Ronald Reagan famously said in his farewell address at the end of his, storied public life, he said, they call me the great communicator, but I really wasn't. I was just communicating great things. And they're the same great things that have guided our nation since its founding. And so I told all my colleagues in the RSC, I said, what are those great things? How would you identify that? How would you describe it? If you had just a couple of minutes in an elevator with somebody and you wanted to convince them the correctness, the rightness of the conservative cause, what would you say? And I said, to me, it would boil down to 7 core principles. And these aren't magical. This is the way I would articulate it, explain it. If you distilled the entire Republican Party platform down to a half page, all the principles that undergird the platform, what would it be? And I said, this is my take on it and what I would suggest to you all. It boils down to these things: individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. I said, now under each of those, there's lots of those are, there's subcategories under each of those, and we could articulate all that, and as time permits, we will. But let's agree at least on this basic set of fixed points on the horizon. As we're in high seas, as we're in uncharted waters, we have to keep our eyes on those things because that's what's going to guide us as it has since the time of our founding. Why does that relate to all you guys, and how does it relate? Well, that was all pre-pandemic, and now everything is in disarray. There's been almost a total reset on the table. You hear people who previously described as fiscal conservatives crying now for the government to save us, for large deficit spending programs and all these other things. People are losing their way, and they're forgetting what it is ostensibly that we all stand for. And so how it relates to you guys is that it's just never been more important than it is right now for us to have a new generation of leaders that are up and coming, who understand these basic truths, who can, talk about this with conviction and consistency and and clarity. Excuse me. And I just think that what you're doing right now is so important for that reason. I'm getting choked up about it. Can you tell? I'm so compassionate about it. We need some help. We need. There's not enough of us who are doing this work and are able to articulate it this way. And so I would encourage you to do that, to take advantage of opportunities like this, these rare opportunities, extraordinary opportunities like the Forge Leadership Summit and all these, the conferences, because what you have to understand is that it is so important for you personally to have that kind of mentorship and connectivity and the training that you'll get. Man, I wish I'd had the opportunity to do some of that, when I was your age. It would have made a big difference to me, but you're given an opportunity to do things like that, and it'll make a big difference to you. And we need you to be well-versed and well-trained and well-mentored, because this is not a game. We're in a battle for the very future of the republic. I mean, in a literal sense, where this is not hyperbole. You can look now, watch the evening news, and see this play out. We're at a critical crossroads as a country, mixing my metaphors now, and we've got to decide: are we going to maintain a limited government, individual freedom, constitutional republic, or are we going to shift into some big government socialism kind of model? And I think all of us know the answer to what it must be, but there are fewer and fewer people able to make that case and to articulate it well. And so we need you guys to join us on the front lines. And so really excited about the opportunity you have. I hope that you'll pursue those things, and that you'll use people like me as a resource in the days and weeks and years ahead, because we have to be investing in you, because we'll be passing that baton on someday really soon. So let me stop talking and see if y'all have questions or things you want me to address specifically.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman. We're doing questions through an app, and so I'll be curating those. Our first question. Well, before I do that, just a reminder: everyone can go to forgeleadership.org/questions and submit your questions for the Congressman. So we'd love to have participation with that. So first question says, what are a few practical tips for living out your faith in the political realm when using faith as a platform of conviction is looked down upon by the left?
Well, wear it on your sleeve, not in a way to do it in a way that's boastful, because the Apostle Paul told us, he warned us directly against that, right? The only thing we can boast about is the strength that we have through Christ and in our faith, but to not hide from it, because I can tell you that there's a desire, there's a thirst among people, particularly right now, people are looking for reliable answers. I mean, to the big questions about life, right? And there's this admonition in Scripture, 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. And if you're put in a position of influence and you have a platform, and all of us do, we have a sphere of influence around us, that we have to be faithful to that, and we have to be prepared in season and out to give those eternal answers that are the satisfying answers to all life's big questions. And so what the key to it is just remembering who you are and who you serve. I served in the state legislature for a little while, and then I got to Congress, and people often ask, in each one of those arenas at each level, what was the most surprising thing, to you when you got there? And I always say it's pretty easy. The most surprising thing, the most shocking thing, the most frightening thing is that when you get in these arenas, you recognize that many people, I mean, I would even say most people who are elected to public office, certainly at the local, state level, even at the congressional level, they get elected to these offices, these high positions of power and authority, and they have no idea what they really believe. And what I mean by that is they don't have a fully formed worldview. They don't have even in most cases, a fully formed philosophy of government. And so people are often perplexed, and they see elected officials swinging this way and that on issues, and erratic voting records and all that. And the reason for it's pretty simple. They didn't get elected to advance any particular philosophy. They just kind of go with whatever the loudest lobbyist or the biggest influence is, and that's how they make their decisions. I had an 8th grade teacher that told me something that had a big impact on my life. He was a great Christian leader, and he said, what's popular isn't always right, and what's right isn't always popular. And if you remember some basic truths like that, and you remember who you serve, and that's God himself, and then your constituents, and you serve the causes and the principles that we believe in, it makes it a whole lot easier. And then you know what you do, you gradually care a whole lot less about what critics say and think and believe, because you know you're doing the right thing. And here's the other thing I'll tell you about that. When you do that, when you show backbone, it inspires backbone in others. And we need a few more strong leaders who will swim against the tide, because it encourages others to do the same. So look, part of it's perspective, and part of it is just knowing why you get into that. The old axiom is, and y'all have heard it before, but everybody runs for office for one of two reasons. They either want to be somebody or do something. You want to kind of generally stray away from the people that are in the first category and navigate towards the others, because those are the ones that are that are going to do the meaningful things and the things that are worthy of following.
Awesome. Thank you, Congressman. We have our next question is from Rebecca.
Hello, Congressman. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us.
Sure.
I just have a question for you. I was wondering what it's like to balance your political interests with the people you're representing, if they're often together, or if sometimes you find yourself representing the people and it's not exactly what your preferred political interest would be.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question and a common one. My background's in constitutional law, and I was a federal court litigator for about 20 years. I defended religious liberty and the sanctity of life and those big issues in the courts before I got into politics. And I learned that often, public opinion could be drifting one way when the right thing and the right argument and the right principle is sometimes opposed to that. And so it's what my 8th grade teacher said, that really is at the end of the day what you're supposed to do. When the founders, I'm a nerd about this stuff because I'm a constitutional law guy, I'm old school. And, you look at what the founders intended and the way they set up our republic, it's a unique thing. It's still an experiment on the world stage, by the way. We're only 243 years into this, and we don't know how long a republic like this can last. But the founders said there's a couple of presuppositions to make it so. And one of the presuppositions is that you'll have an informed and engaged electorate, that if you're going to have government of, by, and for the people, and the people have to be informed and engaged to make that work. But one of the other premises of our republic, of course, is that we're not a democracy. Democracy, of course, is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. And in a republic, you have elected leaders who serve the interest of smaller segments of the population. It's the only way it can work that way. And when you're elected to serve, the way I've always seen it is you're elected to first do the right thing and then to serve the will of the constituency. And sometimes popular opinion, as I said, goes a different way of what's right. And so you have to be willing to make tough choices and make hard votes and do things that are right, and be able and willing to go back home and explain to people why you may not have voted in the way that they thought they wanted you to, right? And I've had a lot of experience with this, and I can just tell you, when you're authentic and you're true and you share your heart, people will forgive you voting a way that they didn't like, because they know that you did it with the right intention and the right the right principle in mind. So it's I'll give you a quick anecdote, a funny story. There's a group locally in my area that came up with this great new app, the latest invention, right? And it's this app that basically you can take the pulse of your constituents. They say if everybody opts in and purchases the app, you can take real-time polls of your district on every vote you take. They say that's how they sell their software. And they came to make their pitch to me because some state reps and state senators had kind of bought into it in the area. And I had to explain to these gentlemen I had no interest in their app whatsoever. And they said, "What do you mean? Don't you want to know what your constituents think about every single vote?" And I said, that's of interest to me, but it's not going to govern how I vote. I'm not voting because something's popular. I'm voting because it's right. So, it would be, frankly, a waste of my time to take the pulse of voters. See, the reason that we send elected representatives is because I'm supposed to be the one that is well-versed in every dynamic of a particular issue, to know all the facts and the figures, and to go deep. And a lot of people make, spur of the moment opinions based on some talking point or conjecture or misinformation that they heard. And so my job as a representative is to dig deep and know the facts and know exactly how I'm going to vote, because I know the people's heart and their best interest. And the popular opinion doesn't always align with that. So that's a long-winded answer to explain to you. These guys, they're still mad at me. They can't understand why I don't want their app. I mean, it's of no use to me, because I'm came to advance the principles that made America great and going to continue to make America great. And if they fall out of favor, then so be it. But I'll be the last guy standing that'll do that, and that's just the way I see it.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Denora.
Yes, thank you for talking with us today. My question would be, what is something that you do to remember who you are and who you serve? Like something that you do regularly to keep that at the forefront, maybe daily, regularly. I don't know, something that is helpful for you.
Yeah, sure. Well, you have to be authentic about who you are. And one of my mentors, kind of a big brother to me, is Tony Perkins, who's president of the Family Research Council. We came up together in Louisiana, and he told me a long time ago, he said, Mike, if we're going to purport to be pro-family guys, we have to actually be pro-family guys. We have to live that, right? And so my wife Kelly and I have 4 kids, 18 and under, and the way I stay grounded and centered is to be home as much as I can, and the purpose for all this. Daily prayer and devotion is certainly important, increasingly so now in this wild arena and wild environment that we're in. But that's a great question and a really important one. It's just you have to keep your priorities straight. It's easy to lose your head, and the higher people go in the echelons of power, the greater and greater the temptations there are if they walk into those arenas and don't know and don't have a very settled thing in their heart and mind who they are and who they serve before they get there. And that's the admonition I always give to younger people who are the up and coming leaders, is that be sure you have all that set in solid concrete before you enter elected office or these arenas, because I've seen seemingly good people just get eaten alive by it. The power goes to their head, the temptations go to their head, and because they lose sight of those perspectives. And so it's something that's a daily reminder. I mean, I'll give you from a spiritual sense, we are, our lives are a living sacrifice, right? And the thing about a living sacrifice is it can crawl right off the altar every day. So you have to constantly die to self, right? From a spiritual sense, it's a daily sacrifice that we make for the causes that we serve and the kingdom and that we serve. So I think that's a really important reminder. I'm glad you asked the question. It's a daily thing every day.
All right. Next question is from Jake Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, for speaking with us. As somebody who's interested in pursuing law after undergrad, how did that shape the way that you serve in public office now, and how's that kind of been a part of your story?
Great question, Jake. I got a son named Jack Johnson. That's a good all-American name, buddy. Look, I recommend law school to I'm sure a lot of people on this call are kind of inclined that way. It's a natural kind of inclination that you have. I'm the first college graduate in my family, obviously the first to go to law school and all that. And I was blessed to have people in my life early on, mentor kind of folks who took an interest in me. My dad was a disabled firefighter, so I had no, frame of reference about college or anything, but people took an interest in me, and they started telling me at a young age, you should be a lawyer. You'd be a great lawyer. I had no idea what that meant. I'm really glad I got, kind of steered in that direction. But I would tell you that it's a very valuable thing to have if you aspire to get into the legislative arena at some point, public policy, because it gives you a leg up in your ability to understand just kind of the dynamics of what's happening, to understand, to be able to take a piece of complex legislative text and break it down. I mean, the skills, the analytical skills that you learn in law school are just really beneficial. I practiced for about 20 years before I got into elected office. So this is in a way, kind of an extension of what I used to do. And if you want to be a total nerd about it, try to get into the arena of constitutional law, because there's only a handful of people that do that. And the funny thing about it is, in these arenas, when you walk into the state legislature or Congress for that matter, and your background, you're known to be the constitutional law guy, they just assume you know what you're talking about, even when you don't. It's kind of funny, kind of scary in a way. But you get you get a lot of deference for that. I mean, people have different areas of expertise and stuff in these arenas, but that's one that I just think would serve you well. I have 4 kids. I think I mentioned that, and I have 2 daughters this fall who will be in college. One will be a sophomore, one is a freshman, and they have different aptitudes and skills. But nobody in my family is good at math, so they're almost doomed to go do the law school route. But I've advised them to get business degrees because it makes you more marketable. And to get a law degree, because the amount of time that you have to invest in that for what you get on the other side and the value of it, to me, is just a great investment. It's 3.5 years or 3 years in some states. Whereas if you go to med school, you got 8 or 10 years or whatever, or longer, right? So you come out with a doctorate and you have a platform, particularly in the arena of public policy and this kind of stuff, to just do a lot of things. And you never have to litigate a case if you don't like that stuff. And there's plenty you can do with it. So to me, it's just it's a no-brainer. If you even think you have an inkling that you might go in that direction, I think the law degree is a great way to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Congressman. One last question. What do you think is the biggest challenge conservatives will face as the country reopens in light of COVID-19?
Well, I mean, very practically and immediately is some of these debates that we'll have to be able to explain. You hear the cry for more help, from the federal government and the bailouts to the state and municipalities and all this other stuff. And what we have to be able to do is articulate our principles in a way that are reasonable and show compassion and understanding, but also are faithful to these core principles that we believe in and the things that we believe are going to be best for the country in the short run and the long run. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. We had a conference call with the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, just several days ago, and there's a bunch of conservatives in the House on the call with him, and he was saying things like, I mean, this is not, I'm not disparaging Chairman Powell, but I'm just telling you that he was saying to us, he knew he was on the phone with fiscal conservatives, and he was saying to dream big, like in terms of new federal spending. And then he went and said the same thing to Speaker Pelosi, and she took his advice, and they gave us a $3 trillion spending bill. I mean, he's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he told us on a phone call that, we really shouldn't be concerned about federal debt and don't worry about deficit spending. And I mean, it was just almost frightening. So, I mean, people in the highest levels of authority are saying things that are contrary to what we all know is true and right and best for the country. And so we have to have resolve like we've never had before. And we have to be able to look right into those cameras and those hostile interviews and explain without reservation why we know this to be true. I said that I was at the White House 2.5 weeks ago or so. The president had 19 of us come in for a meeting. It was televised and all that. And it was about reopening. I'm on the Reopen America Task Force. And he said, what are the ideas? And we went around the table, and I said, and I concluded with what I'm telling you guys now, and I'll conclude this way. I just said, Mr. President, let us not forget Larry Kudlow was sitting 2 seats down from me, and I gave him a compliment about something he said on a conference call with us a few days before that. And contrary to what Chairman Powell said, Larry Kudlow said, let's not lose sight of the core principles as we go forward, right? And I complimented him on that, and I said, Mr. President, the reason that we were able to have this record economy and all these great strides, and up to February, right before the pandemic, we had the greatest economy in U.S. history. The reason is, Mr. President, because we advanced those same guiding principles that Reagan used to talk about, right? We advanced individual freedom, limited government, free markets, lower taxes, less regulation. Mr. President, those are the things that we have to double down on now. Those are the things that are going to get us out of the hole that we're in post-pandemic and make America, as you say, on the transition back to greatness. That's what we have to do, and that's what we have to advance. And the president nodded, and he agrees. So he needs all of us, and all of us need one another to be echoing that same sentiment now more than ever. And it's going to be unpopular in a lot of quarters to do it, but we know it's right. And so that's our greatest challenge right now.
Those are our first 2 keynote speakers, Alison Centofante of Live Action. We've got contact info for Alison if you want to follow up with her, as well as Congressman Mike Johnson from the great state of Louisiana. Excited that in a little bit, at the top of the hour, Shaun Alexander, former NFL star running back and national speaker, will be joining us, as well as our final speaker of the evening, Dr. Jeff Myers. So very excited about this. Soon, in a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by Ohio State Representative Jena Powell, who is a proud Forge graduate. And we're going to have a little bit of an interview for you to hear a testimonial from someone around your age who was just in the position of attending Forge or volunteering with Forge and more. But before that, I want to give you an outline of what the Forge experience looks like. Okay, so I shared with you that the mission of Forge is to mentor, train, and connect young conservatives ages 18 to 25, to mentor, train, and connect young conservatives ages 18 to 25, so that you can be prepared to lead in politics, business, and in culture. But how do we do that, right? So how do we carry out that mission? If we promise to really help you grow personally and professionally, how do we deliver on that? So if you apply to the Forge Leadership Summit, what are you going to get out of it? And that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about right now, and then Jenna is going to join me. So the Forge experience is comprised of two main parts: the Forge Leadership Summit and the Forge Mentorship Academy, which is what the summit feeds into or funnels into. So you've got the Forge Leadership Summit and you've got the Forge Mentorship Academy that follows. The first part, or the gateway, is the Forge Leadership Summit. It's a 5-day intensive filled with dynamic training, professional development, and renowned speakers like the ones that you're hearing tonight. Accepted students and young professionals represent talented conservatives ages 18 to 25 from across America who want to engage in politics, business, and culture. The Forge Summit every year brings together young adults who are pursuing different vocations, but who are all dedicated to better understanding and really defending the first principles of the American founding in our unique 21st century context. The Forge Summit really informs and equips you through the 3 Ps, as we like to call it: timeless principles, practical skills, and a simulated legislative process. We recruit speakers, thought leaders, influencers in the conservative movement to speak at the Forge Summit. They teach you how to think critically about the principles and policies of conservatism, including limited government, Judeo-Christian ethics, religious liberty, economic freedom, and servant leadership. But we also believe that a keen understanding of conservative thought and conservative principles is best mobilized and applied through really providing you hands-on training. So throughout the Forge Summit, you'll engage in the following trainings: media training, message crafting, a full campaign in a day simulation, which is a team competition with a Shark Tank finish, if you know that TV show. It's not the millions of dollars, but otherwise. And the Forge Legislature, which is you get a simulated experience of the legislative process. You're trying to pass your own bills on a real state house floor. You're coached by real state representatives through that process. Now, the Forge Summit, those 5 days, is also really a 5-day interview of sorts. So throughout the summit, we're going to be evaluating you for acceptance into the Forge Mentorship Academy, which is, as I promised earlier, the second part of the Forge experience. So the Forge Mentorship Academy, the academy, is designed to supplement full-time studies or employment. So it admits standout graduates of the Forge Summit. So after the Forge Summit, we'll accept applications for those who want to make the academy. And if you were chosen for the academy, you'll be doing so from your school, from your job. It's not a gap year. It's supposed to seamlessly complement what you're already spending most of your time on. The academy is a year-long program offering experiential learning in national and international politics. Offered experiential training in national and international politics, as I said. The academy highlights, the highlights of this year include an individualized mentor match. So each of you is paired with a mentor who's making the specific impact and shares the convictions that you have and that you want to make. We connect you with top internships and jobs. So we go to bat for you to help put a face to the name and utilize the connections and leverage the networks in Forge and in the movement to help you get those top internships and jobs that you desire. And further experiential learning in Washington, D.C. in early January, and Israel that next summer. So during the 4 days in DC, you'll interact with the political process from 360 degrees. You meet with congressmen and women, staffers, advocacy groups, culture leaders, think tank scholars, journalists, and more. Evening activities are going to involve monuments by moonlight, where we focus on a reflection on the character of each founder, and a private after-hours exclusive tour of the U.S. Capitol led by a congressman and their staff, and more. So it's an all access way to experience DC that is more about networks than tourism. You could spend 2 years interning in DC, and I guarantee you will not make the connections that you'll get and have the exclusive experiences that you'll have through what we call Forge 201. If the Forge Summit is 101, if you remember the way your college courses were cataloged, if the Forge Summit at the state capitol is 101, the Forge DC experience is Forge 201. And then 6 months after that, you might be sensing a trend here. So we've got state capitol, state policy, national domestic policy in the nation's capital. And then 6 months after that, you get to travel to the Holy Land to trace the roots of the Judeo-Christian biblical faith, and also come face to face with the modern day geopolitical realities of the Middle East. So you encounter the history of the biblical faith by walking in the footsteps of Abraham, David, Jesus, the disciples, and taking excursions to all those famous biblical locations. But you also grow familiar with modern day Israeli culture and the region by hearing from diplomats, ballistic experts, soldiers, members of Israeli parliament, rabbis, professors, and more. So not only are you sharing national and global international experiences and understanding both domestic and foreign policy, but we're also pouring into you individually throughout that entire year, both by pairing you with personal mentors and by hosting monthly conference calls with incredible expert speakers like Ambassador Sam Brownback, Michael Ferris, CEO of ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, and more. And look, Forge is nothing if it's not helping launch you into your careers. So we're helping you develop your brand, improve your networking skills, build the relationships necessary to further your dreams. Okay, Forge is meant to reduce your learning curve. Why stumble around in the dark? Why try to get lucky with meeting the right person if there are people dedicated to your success who have already done that for you? So we leverage the power of the conservative movement for our alumni. Gosh, guys, through this year, you're going to create deep relationships with like-minded peers and mentors from around the country. You're going to have incredible life-changing experiences, and you're going to build lasting networks and get a leg up on the competition. Now, it's really my pleasure to now introduce you to someone who has experienced all of those things through Forge. State Representative Jenna Powell.
Hey guys, thanks for letting me join you all today.
Hey, it's our pleasure, Jenna. Thanks for being with us. I know busy day at the State House and nothing going on in the news that would have any elected official.
No, very slow around here for sure. Nothing too crazy. Nothing like trying to open up our entire state again or anything.
Small task, small lift. Thank you for what you're doing. By the way, thank you for serving your constituents and doing that. Jenna, why don't you give our students a look into your path with Forge? You attended Forge 101, the Forge Summit, as both a volunteer and a participant. For those who don't know, Jenna's brother Justin I mentioned him earlier, co-founded Forge with me. And Jenna helped both participate, but also run our entire event. So I don't know if that week was a blur, Jenna, but what do you remember from the Forge Summit?
Yeah, so, to begin with, so like Adam mentioned, my experience with Forge was a little bit different, but I think a lot of the same philosophy and the same impact took place in my life that I've seen over the years in many other students' life at Forge. I went into Forge with an understanding that I wanted to serve my community in one way or another. For me specifically, at the beginning of my experience, it was definitely not through politics at all. But some of the large takeaways at the end of the first week was just hearing from speakers that had not only incredible hearts, but incredible experiences in fighting in whether the state legislature or the federal government. I think it's very easy for me as an individual who was raised in the country to just think, honestly, all politicians were evil, that the people don't really have a voice. And as we walked through the week of Forge 101, what I grew to understand is that, we the people do have a voice, that we as individuals are called, whether it be to politics or business or church ministry or stay-at-home moms, but all of us are called to fight for freedom in one way or another. And I think one of the big things that someone told me was that, Jenna, they said every single day in America, we are either walking toward more freedom or we are walking toward less freedom. And they said there's no neutrality when it comes to freedom. And I found that very interesting. And, after Forge 101, it definitely kind of gave me a taste and an understanding. And I left there saying, as an American, as a Christian, and as an individual who loves my community, I have to serve in some way, whether that meant public office, whether that meant in business. I thought for me personally, it meant serving my community through business. But I knew that, the mindset shift took place in my heart, in my mind, that said, I have to do something.
Absolutely. Jenna, thank you. And Jenna, how did you alluded to it, right? So co-owning a business with friends and siblings in the marketing, advertising space, caring about culture, but I think safe to say that Forge and some of your subsequent experiences had kind of a career or life-altering shift on you eventually. How did that come about?
Yeah. So Adam, great question. Many of you have probably heard your parents say, you can never be too careful about who you hang around. And for me, that is 100% true. Because if you would have asked my friends, I legitimately would say all politicians were crooks and horrible human beings. But not only did God change my heart, but also God put individuals in my life that showed me something different. So, when I went to Forge 201 in Washington, D.C., I remember I believe it was Congressman Mark Meadows, and he was one of the men that truly changed my perspective on what a good public servant was. He could have been anything. And what I saw of him, and now that I'm in the legislature, what I truly see is that it takes a lot of work to work on good policy and to put forth good legislation. And when I saw the heart of Congressman Meadows, and when I heard him speak to our group, it was out of a heart of service. And to me, that was really foreign because that's not what I saw on TV. That's not what I'd heard about in our communities. And when I saw, the fight that he put in every day, to me, that was just like mind-blowing. So I think in my mind, the first one was a mind shift of political philosophy and the philosophy of America. 201 for me was a shift that, wow, good people can actually be in politics. And not only can they actually be in politics, we need good men and women in politics to sacrifice. So at 201, I definitely saw that through people like Congressman Meadows, Congressman Jim Jordan, hearing them speak, talking about, the historical context of what has happened around the United States to then have what we have today in Washington, D.C. And then I went to Israel. So 301 is, as Adam mentioned, is where you guys go to Israel. I had done some traveling, but I'd really not been to a lot of other countries. And when you're in Israel, it's an incredible experience to walk where Jesus walked. But also on top of that, you get a lot of geopolitical, talks and understanding. And, the friends that I had on that bus, we would get on the bus and discuss all about, foreign policy and different things like that in regards to the Middle East. And I remember after that week, I specifically knew that freedom comes at a cost. We were on the Gaza Strip, and I remember something that just never goes away in your mind is we were near a playground, and right near the playground is a bomb shelter, and it's painted to look like a caterpillar. And I remember the gentleman that was showing us this community said that each of the children had to be within 12.5 seconds of a bomb shelter at any time. And a lot of the children suffer from PTSD. They suffer from a lot of just mental illnesses from the fear that they are going to be, attacked at any time. And I have a little sister who's 9 years old, and I just remember thinking, my sister doesn't have to live in that fear. But because I knew from 101 that we were either walking more toward freedom or it was being taken away every day, I knew at that point that we had to, we had to be a voice in one way or another. And so I think through a lot of the friends at Forge, that's really what shifted my entire mindset. And even after that, I actually came back thinking I was still going to do it through business. And that's another whole conversation of how I even ended up here.
Well, and Jenna, that's helpful. That's really helpful insight. And you've talked about those experiences. The trips, and how has the Forge network served you beyond your experiences that year?
Yeah. Adam, so I'm sure you're familiar with a quote from Truman. He said, I think it's paraphrased, but in essence, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. I think that can be said whether you're in Washington, D.C. or whether you're in Columbus, Ohio, that you're not in politics to have friends. And frankly, very rarely do you have friends. It's a very cutthroat, you could say, business where trust is not earned easily, and it's not kept very well very often. The biggest thing that I have received from Forge, besides an entire change of life of my life, but I would say the second biggest thing is the friendships that I have gotten. And you guys are probably sitting there like, oh yeah, I've heard about friendships from other networks and things like that. But I'm telling you, Forge is completely different. I talk to people I have met through Forge every single day. My legislative aide is from Forge. And I know the people that I've met and I've become friends with. It's beyond politics. It's people who care about me, who now know me, and who are willing to say, Jenna, you're wrong, or Jenna, you're right in different situations. And when you're in politics and when you're in Columbus, people are just stabbing you in the back literally all the time. Most people want to see you fail. In business or in college, like your parents want you to succeed, your teachers want you to succeed. But politics isn't that way. Politics, it is a very cutthroat business where you don't have many friends. And when you find friends that will tell you the truth at any time and will be there no matter if you've had a terrible interview or a great interview, will be there to help you think through the political philosophy behind the bills that you're working on. Those are the kind of people that you want with you the rest of your life. Even though politics, sometimes when you're in the legislature, seems like you're kind of an island unto yourself, the political network is made up of good people around the United States. It is a team sport. To be able to win and to be able to push forth our conservative cause, we have to have networks in the state and around the United States. And for me, that's what Forge has done. I know it was my first month of my first term of my first year. It was the night before. I had to have a speech prepared, and legitimately, I had no clue what I was doing. So I texted Adam, who texted friends, and I had a speech written by 9 a.m. the next day. And it was a speech that I knew I could be proud of. I knew that was philosophically correct, and have helped me in just so many different ways, whether it be speech prep, whether it be bill writing, whether it be, my legislative aide. Those are people that I can trust along the way. And Adam, I can't thank you enough for that, because I am grateful, because like I said, friends don't come easy in the legislature. And frankly, that's not why I'm here.
No, that's well said. And Jenna, that was one of the questions that one of our students had. And another one that I'm going to give you a rapid fire two-part one here. Okay. So advice. One of our students or attendees of this preview is asking advice for somebody coming to Forge. What should they do to prepare for the Forge Summit? And then the second question is, as a young person who aspires to run for office, what advice would you have for them? So advice for attending Forge and advice for preparing to run for office.
Okay, so the advice for attending Forge, I would say, Three things. One, come prepared, ready to learn. That's very, obvious. Two, come prepared, ready to meet people. And three, come prepared, ready to get not very much sleep. But those are the three things that I would really say, like Forge will change your life. But one of the best things I actually heard when I went to Israel for the first time is they said, you're not going to realize you learn a lot of things until about a year later. And for me, Forge was a start of a journey for me. So, get ready to say, I know this isn't the end of where I'm going to be. It's just the beginning. And I want to lay a good groundwork to be able to go where I want to go. So that would be the thing I would say to Forge members. And you can message me at any time as well. And I'm happy to chat with you. And if you're going to the Columbus one, I'll probably see you guys there as well for at least a day, if Adam doesn't kick me out of the Capitol. And then the second thing, so your second question would be about people who want to run for office. I'm going to be really honest. I would say that that's maybe the wrong question. I would say that I think your mindset should probably shift and say, instead of the goal being running for office and winning, your mindset should be, how can I change my community and my state in the best possible manner? And, I think running for office and in being in the legislature, for me, it wasn't a goal. For me, it was right place, right time. I think a calling from God, and those things all lined up together. I think you could potentially be very sorely disappointed and missed out on a lot of opportunities if your only goal is to be elected. There are many ways that you can impact your community, your state, and your nation. Maybe God opens the door to run for Congress. Maybe he opens the door to run for state rep. Maybe it's mayor, but maybe it's also running a nonprofit or a church, or, there's so many different areas. So I think that I would maybe challenge your mindset a little bit and say, I want to ask you more questions of why is it running for office instead of other areas? Because when I look at our community, I am only a small portion of defending and fighting for freedom and helping people every single day. But if that is what you feel called to do, then I would say the first thing would be dig into what you believe and why you believe it. If you don't know what you believe and why you believe it, you will be a terrible, terrible elected official. Because there are people who yell at you, who scream at you, who bribe you, who do everything to get you to vote the way they want you to vote. But at the end of the day, I think the congressman said it really, really well. He said, first off, I want to do the work so that I can represent my constituents well. And sometimes that means your constituents aren't going to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And what I tell many of them is I say, you hired me to do the research and to understand the philosophy and happenings of what's going on. You're going to have to trust me at some points that you trust me that the bill that I voted on was best for our community and our state long term. But it's way too easy to get kind of off the straight and narrow very quickly because you feel like this person told you this and this person told you this and a lobbyist and money's flowing. Know what you believe, know why you believe it, and be willing to say, I don't care what anyone else says. This is what I'm called to do, and this is why I'm here. And I think that's crucial. And I think no matter what my constituents vote me in, vote me out in the next year or 2 years or however long I might be here, at the end of the day, what I always ask myself is, when I lay my head down, did I do what I was called to do? Did I do what I said I would do? And did I do those two things with the best of my ability? That's how I go to bed every night, feeling like I've accomplished something, whether or not a bill passed or not. That's actually not my kind of prerequisite. What I am called to do is to be faithful in my calling, to work hard, and to fight well for the people, because I'm only one of 99. And when I do all those things, I can rest assured that I fought well, and I did what I told the people I would do. So,
Jenna, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. Thank you so much for being with us. Great feedback so far from your talk and the comments here, and thank you for sharing with everyone. We're proud of you. Keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, and now I'm excited to share with you. Well, I'm going to introduce you to the person who's going to introduce our next keynote speaker, who is Jonathan Jakubowski. Jonathan is our Forge board chairman. He's a Forge board member. He's a businessman, a husband, a father of four, a former college football player, which ties into the friend he's going to introduce. But he's also a recent author of Bellwether Blues, Conservative Awakening of the Millennial Soul, recently mentioned on the Rush Limbaugh show. The great stamp of conservative approval. There you go, Dan. Dan Ziegler just held up his copy right there. We're really excited about this. The reason we pumped the book is not only are we thrilled for Jonathan about the early success, it was sold out already on Amazon once before, but each of you who applies to Forge, if you apply to the Forge Summit, if you're coming to the Forge Summit, you will get a signed copy of this, thanks to the generosity of Jonathan and one of our supporters. So, Jonathan, would you do me the honors of introducing our next speaker?
Hey, everybody. Good evening. One thing to just follow on the heels of Jenna's last presentation, she's not going to be voted out of office anytime soon. So the only thing that will limit her are term limits. Really excited to see her continue to thrive. And I'm also excited to see all of you, see some of your faces here on Zoom, and looking forward to seeing you at the summit coming up in July. The investment that you're making is well worth your time. This is something that will be life-changing. You've heard that so many times tonight that's one thing I think you'll leave here with tonight. And really, really excited to see what God does with your life through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking because I have somebody very special to introduce. It's not every day that you get to meet a running back that was the high school football player of the year nationwide. It's not every day you get to meet an All-American running back from Division I Alabama Crimson Tide. And it's very rare that you get to meet an NFL MVP. But all of those things to this man mean significantly less than his faith. And the three things that Shaun talks about in the foreword to the book, but what I've seen him live out, are faith, family, and freedom. And the first thing I would say about Shaun's faith is it's authentic. When I met Shaun in 2008 at the right before Christmas, so the transition to 2009, I had heard a lot about him. I knew one of his friends. I'd heard his testimony. I'd seen him on TV. I'd seen him give glory to God when he lost. I'd seen him give glory to God when he won. So when we had our first conversation, the question that I had is, when you meet somebody famous, is that really real? Are they just putting that out there? Is that a front? Well, as I got to spend some serious time with Shaun, going on trips, being in his home, there's a longer story there. My wife was actually the nanny for, at that point in time, they had 4 kids, him and his wife, Valerie. We got to spend a lot of time together, and I got to see the level of authenticity of faith that was unquestionable. There was a level of Shaun's life that went to another dimension when it came to his faith and his recognition that in everything, the most important thing is who he is in Christ. And Jesus being the anchor of his soul is the way he viewed the world. His worldview was founded and built upon his relationship with Christ, and upon that rock he stood, and that's how he treated others. And that's why some random kid from Northwest Ohio, living in DC, going to graduate school, is somebody he was going to invest in, and I wasn't the only one. There were many other lives that he invested in. Well, that foundation of faith led him and leads him to lead his family. Shaun has 11 children and 1 wife, and that really matters when you're in nations like East Africa, talking about how many wives. 11 children, how many wives? He's got 1 wife, and their family is beautiful. It's dynamic. The way that he leads his children is inspiring. His mentorship to me really began before I had kids. Watching the way that he led his children was demonstrable to how you should raise children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And to see his kids growing up now, his oldest, Heaven, is nearing the end of her high school career, which is hard for us to believe. She's getting up there. She's an amazing woman of God, and that family, that dynamic that he represents, when there are so many counterexamples of individuals that have had success but are now in broken situations. I think Shaun shares this statistic with me. 70% of NFL players 5 years after they leave the NFL are divorced and bankrupt. Now, I don't know if that statistic holds, but it's a pretty high number, and it's a staggering number, and it's a number that needs to change. And Shaun's one of the reasons it's going to change, because he's now also mentoring NFL players that are leaving. So the final thing I'll say is freedom. And I think this last piece is something that will relate to some of the things the speakers said tonight. What Shaun says in the foreword that you will eventually read should you come to the summit, and I'm just going to quote it real quickly because it's such a powerful line. He said, "Love is defined by freedom, because to love is to choose. When love is subject to the strength or weakness of one's emotions, it is no longer free. Love is a choice to have strong devotion and strong desires wrapped in truth. Knowing Shaun Alexander for me was a journey in truth and grace. There was not an area of my life that he wouldn't question and ask, are you walking with the Lord in this manner? And yet he represented the eternal grace of God in the walk of that relationship. So when I fell short, he demonstrated to me the love and grace that Christ had for us. And that's true freedom. So there's not much more. I could go on for a long time talking about this guy, but you need to hear from him tonight. So I'm going to pass over the mic to Mr. Shaun Alexander.
Wow, man. So everybody, I want to say hello. John, great introduction. It is always an honor to be a part of whatever John's doing. Adam, of course, you know I love you. In our time, we got to go hang out for a little bit. It is true. Making choices really starts with knowing who you are. And when you know who you are in Christ, it sets the stage for everything wonderful to happen. And so I'm going to talk for a little bit. I know I got a little bit of time to chat and us to come there. But if anybody has any questions, we'll kind of hold them to the end and we'll just kind of talk about them. And if not, trust me, I'll find some more things to talk about. So I think to give a little bit of story about my own self, I am from Florence, Kentucky. That's about 10 minutes outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. My mother is an amazing, godly woman. She would be the big mama of the neighborhood. She was half my friend's father figure. Unfortunately, my dad, it's a crazy story, but my dad had 9 kids from 4 different women. He had a high school sweetheart that had a daughter, and in college, he got his college sweetheart pregnant, and he thought, gosh, I don't want to be that guy. I'm a good dude. He was not saved. And he said, so I'm going to marry this woman. And they went on and had 2 more sons. So he gave him 3 boys. And my dad actually went on and finished his degree at the University of Dayton and was into chemistry and ended up working at a chemistry company or a chemical company. And he drove home and he was driving out from Dayton to Cincinnati where his company was. And as he got there, the company somebody had blown something up, and he turned around and drove back home and found that woman and his wife in bed with another man. So it led to divorce. My dad, 3 years later, runs into my mom, and I asked my mom, I said, what did you see in my dad? Because my mom is just this really godly woman. I mean, she's Southern saved, but she goes in, and my dad was not. And she said, I'm going to write a book about this. I've actually written 2 books before, and I've got a couple of them in my heart. But I'm going to write a book about this one day. She said something I'll never forget. She said, well, your dad had Christian game. I said, oh, Christian game. And what it is here she thought he had some sin in his life, had this conviction stance that he was going to go for Jesus and live that way the rest of his life. And that wasn't the case. In reality, it was a man who got his tail whipped by the world. And instead of making a shift or a true repentance, believing different about who he is and who God is and what he's called to be, he actually just kind of was humbled. And sometimes when you're humbled, it doesn't mean you actually make a shift in what you believe in. And my mom fell for that, which is called Christian game. And they ended up marrying, and they had a son, my older brother Duran, who went to the University of Notre Dame on an academic scholarship, played in a marching band, and they still play some of his cadences at Notre Dame. So it's really cool to have that as an older brother. And then they had the youngest and best looking son. I mean, everybody's got their own roles, play yours, I'll play mine, but that's the role I had. So, so I'm actually child number 7, a decade later. My dad has some more kids, but my dad and my mom's relationship really has some things that created some childhood wounds, but it also created some really good things in me, where I saw my mom be one that's going to give. She was always one that was going to give. I've seen her give her last $200, and even our lights going out in our apartment complex that we grew up. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and so I always thought to myself, I'm going to be a giver. My mom used to always laugh. She'd say, Shaun, I always see if you got $10, your boys are going to eat a Little Caesars. I know you're going to get enough pizza for everybody. God better give you a lot of money. And I used to laugh because that's my heart. My heart is, if I've got it, I'm going to help those around me be able to get it. Not falling in being a place of naivety. I'm going to be one that's going to give with my heart, to give everybody the best that I got all the time. And I got that from my mom. Well, going on, growing up, I was one of those kids that had just really some awesome gifts from God. I got saved at a young age. I fully believe that Jesus was and is the Lord and Savior of the world. And I trusted everything that I was going through was all part of the plan. And I always speak about choices and freedom and liberty. True dominion has to have a choice. True love has to have choice. You don't have dominion unless you have a choice of good or bad. And I explain to people all the time about when folks ask the question, well, why did God even make the tree of good and of knowledge of good and evil? Why did Eve have to make that? I'm like, look, God wanted a race that would truly love him for their own self. They could truly choose. And if you don't have choice of right or wrong, life or death, blessings or curses, then you don't have love and you don't make a choice. God gave us dominion to do that. And so one of the reasons I like talking to young people and to y'all's group is because you guys are people on the brink of just great decisions being made. You guys could choose to come together. You could choose to honor God with your life. You could choose who you're marrying. You could choose how you're going to handle marriage, how you're going to handle child raising. You're at the point of so many decisions that really could cause ripple effects for generations to come. And I know I told John this, all the time, but I was always one of the youngest people in the room, every meeting I went into, So when I was at Alabama, I got asked, I was a sophomore. This guy named Franklin came and spoke, and he was talking about his dad and his ministry. And I got off the stage and just talked about loving Jesus and being obedient. And he says, "Hey, young man, you need to meet my dad and come speak with him." And so the next 2 years, I graduated from Alabama, and that season ended, and I was on stage with 60,000 people speaking for Billy Graham. And I was like, what? Where am I? And I was telling the same message. I'm going to love people hard, and I'm going to go hard for Jesus, but I'm going to allow people to have freedom to make choices and be who God's called them to be. And it's a powerful thing. And you don't have to force it on anybody. You don't have to manipulate anything. God's word is so powerful. If you just walk in it, it changes lives. And so a couple of things that I learned through my years at Alabama was what true discipling is and what true mentorship is. In a matter of seconds, being at Alabama, I learned how to study the Bible. I learned how to give my life and have real friendships and be a true brother to other people, raising them up to be great men of God also. And I did a little stint with some FCA camps. And by the time I got to the pros, I was taking 10 kids a year, or actually 50 kids from 10 different states to FCA camps to teach them the process of mentoring and showing them, hey, you actually can disciple somebody for a week. And the whole goal is really to disciple somebody locally and be in their face and be in their grill for a good season. And the difference between discipling and mentoring is really mentoring is you're not face to face, you're just kind of teaching or coaching. But discipling, you get in their grill. So that was one of the cool things I got to do with being with John was, so we had 2 and some change years where we were always together and got to watch him and Missy grow as a young couple. It's just fun. It's fun actually pulling family together, because when Jesus says, who is my mother, my brother, my sister, those who do the will of God, we all have wonderful opportunities to go teach that, to go teach the older people how to be great examples. I know Paul told Timothy, don't let somebody talk down to you because you're young, but be the one that sets the example. And so there's been many rooms that I've walked into where I got to go set the stage, and it's still there. One of the organizations I work for now, I'm a consultant for. I'm the sports ambassador of their group. It's kind of funny because here you have 60, 70-year-old, some of the biggest businessmen and women and philanthropic leaders in the world, especially in our country. And I'm challenging them on their faith and asking them, well, okay, what are you going to do with $100 million? At the end of the day, we're all going to die. What are we going to do with it? What are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do with your talents? What are you going to do with your treasures? Are you going to really use it for the kingdom, or do you think that your best efforts really move the needle? Does it move the needle for generations? It's a wonderful thing and a wonderful position I have, because I always feel like the best thing we can do is challenge upward and pouring downward. And so I get to go challenge people. I get to go challenge people in both directions. And I remember one of the greatest things that I could do and get is be challenged, is to pour into people that are younger or even immature in their faith compared to where I am. And that journey has been wonderful. As my time from my high school, I went to Boone County High School. It is named after Daniel Boone. Don't judge me. But I did go to Boone County High School, and I went from there to the University of Alabama, and it was just a wonderful experience. I went to Seattle and played with the Seahawks, and anybody that loves little sports, just little history. They were 25 years, and I only had three winning seasons when I got there. And in my 8 years there, we went to playoffs 5 years in a row, winning Division IV them, being in the first Super Bowl for them. And it was just funny to change that organization around. I mean, most young people today are like, oh, the Seahawks are always, yeah. And it was a great honor to be a part of changing their culture. Some people have said that about me. I'm a culture changer. And that's my challenge, is that what do the people say about you all? Are you culture changers? We bring in some great free agents. They would come in from other teams. They'd say, man, it's so like peaceful in y'all's locker room. I mean, like, you see Bibles laid out. You see people talking about Jesus, people talking about marriage, just unashamed. You have unsaved people are atheists, just no conservativeness at all. Y'all know what I'm talking about, and we would just have like the realest raw dog conversations just about life. And, I'm not trying to challenge, or I'm not trying to make you believe anything, but I can lovingly tell you where I stand and actually let you see fruit of that. And it would always be amazing, the conversations and where people's hearts would go. And so here I played all the way till from 22 to 32, and I'm 42 now. And if I told y'all once, I could tell you 50 times how many guys have called me. Oh, essay, you won't believe, man, I'm saved. Or essay, man, remember that girl you told me I should marry? I married her. I'm faithful. I put down the drugs or the drinking. What did I really do? I just really shared Jesus with them. And I just told them I was going to love them till the end. And I was also going to let them have the freedom to choose, and actually look them dead in the eye and say, hey, you're better than that. And actually the truth is God's called you to something greater. But you get to choose that. I'm going to be here no matter what. And those healthy challenges, but big cushy hugs, is what society really needs. And it's been awesome. And so one thing I am really the most excited and proud of when it came to sports was that when people look back, my locker room in Seattle, and once again, looked just like my locker room in Alabama, which looked just like my locker room in high school. The only difference is the older I got, the more mature I got in how to love, and the more bolder I got in how to be bold. And all of them turned into winning programs. I mean, Alabama was already winning, but they were in a tough situation when I got there. And we just kept on winning. And it was really, really sweet. And so I have some more thoughts in my mind, but I think this would be a good time to say, Adam, if you got some questions, I probably should take them. And then if not, then I'll roll to my next thought.
Sure. Yeah. Shaun, thanks for joining us. I will be curating the questions for us this evening. So the first question comes from Maria. Maria, are you able to ask that? If not, she says, you mentioned always being the youngest in the room. What advice do you have for another youngest in the room? Any advice on how to lead in an older workplace?
Yeah, so one of my mentors, I would say this first of all, a lot of times when it comes to things, it's learning how to handle authority. And so to have authority, you have to learn how to be up under authority. So you know how to lead, and you also know when it's time for you to be led. And I still have mentors today that just really just come and rock me, from why are you dancing in the end zone, Shaun, to, man, how is your wife and kids? Do you still love your wife? Are you still the faithful man of God that we poured into when you was 21? And so so one of my mentors now was just really challenging me on something that I've learned how to do, and I've just gotten a lot better. And here's how you lead when you're the youngest one in the room. You use this platform or this posture of being curious instead of how would he word it? Well, more demanding, I guess. I'm gonna use the word that he used to use. Well, I'll just tell you. So it's more of a curious kind of posture instead of a more knowing kind of posture. And so, in other words, like, you walk in the room, you see people having a plan, and the plan doesn't look as well. Like, should we buy this, or should we spend money in this city, or should we move in this city? And you ask the question, hey, do y'all think that this is, should we go A, or did y'all think B? And what makes us want to decide A and B? That seems like I'm asking a question, but really, if you got smart people in the room, they're going to figure out that A is not the right direction, we should go to B. But how you posture yourself in asking the question, it looks like you're learning from them, and you really are walking them towards a better answer than what it. And you could even say, oh, I was thinking this over that, but I see what you're saying. And they might say, oh, we didn't even see that, And so that's what you do. You walk people through another way of thinking by being curious for how they came up with their answer or their direction. Because honestly, no one really wants a smart aleck youth kid that thinks they've experienced it all, but everybody wants a young mind that's willing to grow. And so when you ask a question like you're willing to grow, they might see the things that you didn't think, or that they weren't actually looking for. That's how I've always postured myself with older people. I've used questions to actually lead, instead of me saying, well, here's the best answer right here. And if you actually learn how to handle that correctly, it's a more humble posture, because you got to slow yourself down and think, how do I ask this question to point them into what I'm actually seeing? And it's just a good posture to have.
Awesome. Next question is for Burjan.
Mr. Alexander, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. My question to you is, what does Christian godly leadership look like in today's society from your perspective? And how can we as students, as the next generation, lead well?
Yeah, good question. Unfortunately, sometimes the Christian example looks like you got to be bold and up in your face, or the extreme opposite, which is very soft and just so gentle with everybody. And it's really, you don't want to be in either one of those ditches. What the best Christian examples do is they know what they stand for and who they are. And so you actually can lead with, hey, and Paul says best, if you're going to boast in something, boast in your weakness. So I can walk up to you all and say, man, God is perfect. His word is perfect. His plan is perfect. And you know what? I am super flawed. As a matter of fact, I've got some rejection issues that if you push the wrong button, I'll look like a maniac, And the thing is you can look like it's like I'm going to go run and hide, or I'm going to explode and make it look like I'm tougher than what I really am. But here's what I do know. Whenever I trust God, the answers come out really, really good, and I actually have a plan. And so Christian leadership should be humble enough to know that you don't have the answers, but bold enough to know that God does, and you can stand on what you know God has told you. And if you don't know the answer, it's okay to just admit that. One of the biggest flaws with mentoring or discipling is this lack of transparency. So people try to go shoot for, as I say, the artist formerly known as Prince, right? They try to look for this symbol or this great marking, and they actually miss the mark, because no one can be perfect and no one has it all together. And so you're living a facade, and now you train other people to live a facade. But the greatest Christian examples, they have this, man, I trust God. Watch what God's going to do with me. And it's totally not me, it's him. But watch me go hard for him, and he's going to give me the answers. And if he doesn't, I'm okay with that. We just got to stay patient and keep on pressing until he does. And that's the best mark for Christian leaders today. Humble but focused, fully driven and confident in Jesus, but patient in the lack of the limitations that you have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Whatever, John.
Awesome. Next question is from Emma Blair.
Hi, Mr. Alexander. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm a huge sports fan, so it's so encouraging to see an athlete walk in the paths of the Lord. My question for you is, what is the process you use in order to draw lines that aren't explicitly mentioned in Scripture between participating in culture and then living apart for Christ?
Oh, great question, Emma. So, yeah, most people hear the scripture be in the world, but not of it. I remember leaving Alabama and a person was like, man, what are you going to do next year? You're about to be in the pros. You're going to be a first round pick. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, what are you going to do about Sunday? And I was like, huh? He's like, Sunday, like you can't go to church because like you're like in the hotel, you're going to the stadium. I was like, oh, yeah, I've got that. Me and God have talked about that. What are you going to do? I'm going to score so many touchdowns that people are going to be like, man, God must be on that guy, and so the idea is understand what you are called to be and called to do, and then go wear that out for Jesus. It's weird how many people I know that are in the world that just needed to see a godly man or a godly woman be real. And so it's funny. I'm gonna tell y'all a funny story. I'm not close with this person, but it's just a funny story about just life. So my second year, I'm still not married. I'm one of the stars in the league, but I'm not the star that I've become. 3 years later. And we're walking behind the Super Bowl thing, and it's a Pepsi, MTV, ESPN thing, and they're like, hey, come meet this new superstar that's going to be in Seattle. And they're like, yeah, hey, there's this rapper here that we want you to meet. He's going to be really big. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, great. He said, hey, how you doing? My name's Chris. Oh, I'm Shaun. And we shake hands and we talk, and and I go around and I have my brothers with me. So I have my posse, my entourage, and so we everybody leaves and this and that. And then like the next year I hear this song come on, and I don't really listen to a lot of worldly music. I just don't, and so, but I was in the locker room and I heard it and it had a cool beat and it was like, yeah. And everybody's dancing and Little John was the producer of the song. And then all of a sudden they said, and Usher was the singer on it. And then it said, Luda. And I turn around and it's at the last second. I was like, oh, Chris. And it was Ludacris. And I was like, holy cow. 2 years later, we see each other and we're both laughing because now I'm the man in the NFL and I'm the man of the Seahawks. And we look at each other and goes, we start off together. And I was like, yeah, we did, And it's just really funny because now he's acting and singing and doing all the stuff he does, and he's just doing stuff. But I know immediately when I see him, he's going to be like, oh, that dude, Shaun Alexander, real, love God. He was going to marry this girl that was really beautiful, and he was going to save himself for her. And, I was going to know it's just me just being real with him, and he's going to be like, huh. And I don't know where he is with his life at all, but I know that I loved him like he was a brother. We had a good time. And of course, everything that was offered is always offered everywhere in that world. But I was saying no. And he was so engaged with our conversations and hanging out that he was saying no. And I don't know what he did afterwards, you know what I mean? But I do know that when we saw each other 2 years later and I was married and he was like, yo, we started off together. And so I say all that to say, like, you don't have to go fit into the norm. You actually can go and impact the culture. And that's where it is, that you got to just know your assignment. If you're trying to climb some ladder or grab some name, that's not the name that God gave you or the platform that God wanted you to have, then you've got to use manpower to do it. And this world, there's really only three enemies. It's your flesh, it's the world, and it's Satan and his schemes. And so if you actually are really confident in what God has told you to do, then you're not fighting a ladder. You're not fighting a name. You're not fighting for a title. God's going to position all those things for you if it's yours to have. You got to make sure that you're being obedient to what God wants and not falling for any of the lies that those three enemies are going to give you. The world will lie to you and say, well, if you do this, you're really going to have it. Satan will lie to you. Well, this is what's going to be the real satisfaction. And your flesh is going to lie to you. You so need this. You've worked so hard. You deserve. That's your flesh lying. At the end of the day, we have a simple assignment: bring glory to God. Take it all to Him. Lay everything down for Him, and use your life as a neon sign for God to get glory off of. And when you do, it all works. And so when you're in culture, and some people are in this group are in great business world, and hopefully I will get to do business with y'all one day. And some of y'all are in the political fields. I'm sure somehow end up shaking hands with some of y'all someday. Whatever it is, just remember, God has got the plan. He's given the titles. He's the one that puts kings on the thrones. He's the one that owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. You just be who you're supposed to be in that plan, and not try to push for something so hard that it's now ran by your flesh or by the world's standards.
Shaun, thank you so much for being with us. Absolutely thrilled. Great job. We really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time out of your evening. Please thank Val for us and the kids. And hey, maybe just maybe Joe Burrow could be a culture changer for the Bengals like you were for the Seahawks. I don't.
Yeah, he's got a shot. We talk a lot. A lot, so it's really good.
There you go. That's the best news I've heard all day, right there. Yeah. So he's got good mentors in his life. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for speaking truth in these young lives that are looking to follow your way into public life. Different profession, but the public spotlight and trying to do so in integrity and character. Thank you, my friend.
No doubt. We're countering culture, man. It's a beautiful thing.
But thank you. Well, and I'm really excited to also introduce you to our final speaker of the evening, Dr. Jeff Myers. Jeff is an author, he's a speaker, and he's the president of Summit Ministries. Summit is an amazing ministry. I was blessed to be able to take part in it in high school and college, and we're really thrilled because Summit offers just the top-notch training in worldview, apologetics, and in thinking through the questions that culture is posing to you. And Jeff's really become, in the last 20 years, one of America's top authorities on youth leadership development. He's the author of the new book. Unquestioned Answers. And we're thrilled to have him with you tonight. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. How are you all? How's your evening been so far? Thumbs up?
Excellent.
Definitely. Sorry to make you follow NFL MVP.
Oh, that's all right. I could take.
No, they've heard from Congressman Mike Johnson, who you might know from seeing. Forge grad Jenna Powell, who's a state representative here in Ohio. Alison Centofante from Live Action, formerly ADF. So lots of friends and familiar faces, and now you get to take us home. We're excited.
All friends of mine, all great people, and I know Adam is a great mentor to you all, and he loves you guys and invests personally in you. And of course, I don't know if Adam mentioned this, but he is a graduate of the Summit Ministries program that I have the privilege of heading up. So he has been through that program and can tell you a little bit more about it. Of course, I'll probably mention a few things about it as we go, just that possibility that might happen. But I want to really bring this home, hopefully in a powerful way, because I know some of you, it's 9:30 at night, and you have been on the computer all day. You're ready to just get up and stretch and do something else. So thanks for hanging with this. What Adam asked me to talk about is kind of goes right on the tail of what Shaun mentioned. He said we're countering culture. Did you notice that? We're countering culture. We're not encountering culture, we are countering it. In other words, there is much about our job as conservatives, and I'm speaking personally as a Christian, that is standing against what most people in the world are standing for. And it never gets easy. Yesterday, I was visiting with one of my other students who actually is one of my graduates who works in the White House. And she said, "You would not believe the hate mail that we get." And she described some of the things that were said, and some of the packages with mutilated dolls and things like that that have been sent to them. It's absolutely stunning and horrible. And I realized she experiences this at a high level, but we all will experience it at a certain level. That what we stand for is what most of the world stands against, and what we stand against is what most of the world stands for. So how do we learn to discern, first of all, the bad ideas that are around us? And second of all, what strategy do we use to when we encounter other people? So, give me a thumbs up if you have ever been in a place on social media or in person where somebody tried to shame you because of something that you said or believed. Yeah, look at all those thumbs. Yeah. So we're well over half the group here, it looks like, who've actually had that personal experience. I want to tell you a little of my story. I'll just give a brief testimony, and then I'll share some of the key points about what we can do. In order to do this, is it all right if I put a little PowerPoint presentation up there? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me share my screen with you, and then I can still see you a little bit, but I'm going to have these slides running here. This is a picture of the city where I was born. And that's what it looked like when I was a little kid. It's Detroit, Michigan. It was in a horrible state. There were riots. Dozens of people were killed. Thousands ended up going to the hospital. Thousands of buildings were destroyed. Detroit, in many ways, has never recovered. When I was almost 10 years of age, my parents said, "We have got to get out of here. This is crazy." Like, there was a drug dealer who tried to sell drugs to little kids standing on the street corner outside of our elementary school when I was in 3rd grade. So this is a horrible environment. My parents moved us back to their roots, which is Kansas and Oklahoma. So we moved from Detroit, Michigan to Great Bend, Kansas. And here is a picture of Great Bend, Kansas during rush hour. We will move from a town of 1.7 million people to a town of 17,000 people. And we moved from a church of 2,000 people to a church that was so small that my family, my parents and my brother and me, we increased attendance by 20% just by walking in the door of the church. And it was fascinating to me. I would loved living in a smaller town. It felt a lot safer. The people were a lot friendlier, but I wasn't getting answers to a lot of the big questions I had in life. And so when I was ready to graduate from high school, I thought, I'm not only going to graduate from high school, I'm going to graduate from church at the same time. I'm going to walk away from this stuff. I'm really done with God. I'm done with church. But my parents arranged for me to attend a program in Colorado held in this antique hotel called the Grand View Hotel. The program was called Summit Ministries. I walked into the lobby of the Summit Ministries Hotel, and there was the founder of the ministry, Dr. David Noble. I was 17 years of age at the time. I walked right up to him and I said, "I hope you have a lot of answers because I have a lot of questions." What a rude 17-year-old I was. I hope that none of you take that approach to the interactions that you have with adults. But he was very gracious. He didn't say to me, "Look, kid, just sit in class and just listen and learn. Don't be cocky." He didn't even say, "Look, kid, we have all of the answers." What he said was, at Summit, we aren't afraid of the questions. We aren't afraid of questions. That's what I needed to know. Little did I understand the power that questions would have in my own life from that point forward. But in a strange sort of way, it affirmed my faith and helped me grow in my faith to understand that God wants us to be inquisitive people. He wants us to be curious. He wants us to look. He wants us to ask questions and then look seriously for answers. And you think about, I mean, I just took some pictures of things that I see around my town. You see this sort of thing probably where you live. Every Christmas in Colorado Springs, a group called American Atheists put up a billboard, just skip church, it's all fake news. Happy holidays from American Atheists. I see television programs, all of these people, all these talking heads just screaming at one another. Just look at all those different facial expressions. There's a story behind every one of those facial expressions just captured right there. In my town, people express themselves through bumper stickers. Our work is in Manitou Springs, Colorado, which is a little hippie town tucked right at the foot of Pikes Peak. Beautiful little place, but very, very hippie. People express themselves through bumper stickers. When people put a bumper sticker on their car, it's sort of like posting a social media meme. It's not that you're inviting conversation, it's that you're trying to end the conversation. Nobody who puts a bumper sticker on their car is expecting someone to pull them over to the side of the road and have a fascinating 15-minute dialogue about the ideas being expressed. No, they're trying to put that bumper sticker on there to say all thought ceases because this is the clincher. This is the knockout punch. This is the thing that will win the argument for sure. And so everybody seems to be looking for that. In social media, it's that, mic drop moment that everybody's looking for, where nobody can possibly refute this because I have just said the most brilliant thing that could possibly be said. What we're finding in our work at Summit is that people aren't persuaded by that at all. That if you really want to change hearts and minds, you can't do it through shame. If you shame somebody into believing something, they will stop talking to you, but that doesn't mean they're persuaded. There's an old saying you need to keep in your mind. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So we have got to find a different way to identify the bad ideas and to know how to refute them. Here is the key word. The key word is patterns. Patterns. Patterns are the key to success in every area of life. If you were to talk to Shaun about his football career, he will tell you that being able to identify his opponent's patterns of play was key to his success. If you were a middle school football player, you would never be able to identify those patterns. They're far too subtle. They're far too professional. But by the time you get to that level and you've played thousands of hours of football and practiced thousands of hours, you can identify what is going on. The same is true in tennis. Weird studies. One study showed that the average hit in a professional tennis match, just the ball going back and forth over the net, the ball is moving so fast that it is physiologically impossible for a person to return it. The only way for you to return the ball is for you to hit the ball back before your brain realizes that the ball has arrived. And yet, you watch a professional tennis match and they hit the ball back and forth all of the time. They're doing something impossible. But how do they do it? It's because they identify the patterns of these key ideas. I believe that the Bible gives us these patterns for life. I remember hearing when I was a younger man, 1 Chronicles 12:32. It gives praise to the tribe of Issachar, men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do, 200 chiefs and all their kinsmen under their command. Look at that. We want to be people who have an understanding of the times to know what America ought to do. I believe that Jesus is my Savior, but I also believe that Jesus gives me a framework for understanding all of reality, that I can go off to my classes and Jesus has something to say about everything we talk about. Now, I may not know what it is. I may not know how to articulate it. I may have to really dig deep and study and learn, but there is something there. All right, let me give you an illustration about patterns. When you look at the picture that is on the screen, what is the first impression that you get? You don't have to say it aloud, but what's the very first thing you see? Now, if the very first thing you see there is a frog, can you just give me a thumbs up real quick? Just give me that thumbs up. You see a frog there, right? Okay. Yeah, most people see a frog. Could I persuade you that it is a horse? You say, no, I don't think you could persuade me that it's a horse. It's clearly a frog. But I want you to tilt your head to the right and imagine that what you thought was the frog's eye is actually the nostril of the horse. What you thought was the frog's haunches is actually the eye of the horse. And what you thought was the current going downstream is the mane of the horse. Can you see it? So what is it? Is it a frog or is it a horse? See, the thing about patterns is that once you recognize that this is an optical illusion that is both a frog and a horse at the same time, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Does that make sense? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You will always, forever and ever, when somebody shows you this picture, you will see both the frog and the horse, because now you're tuned in to the pattern that is part of the optical illusion. Ideas flow in patterns too. That's the point I wanted to get to. There are many, many illustrations that I could give you from history. This one is quite startling. In the aftermath of World War II, in about 1948, the Korean Peninsula split into two parts. The part of the Korean Peninsula that we now call North Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is a communist country. It decided to go the pathway of Marxism and atheism. South Korea decided to go the pathway of Christianity. This is not to say that most people in South Korea are Christians, but it is to say that the Christians in South Africa exert an enormous amount of influence. And they are very, very hearty and persistent. They have a lot of grit. I've been in South Korea several times, and on each trip, it is amazing to me how many people will get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning to pray for hours before they go to work. They're very, very serious about their faith. So North Korea went toward atheistic Marxism. South Korea went toward Christianity. One of the things you will learn if you ever participate in one of our Summit Ministries programs is that ideas have consequences. And you can see these consequences literally from outer space. I'm going to show you a picture of the Korean Peninsula at night from outer space. Look at that. There's South Korea, all well lit and prosperous. There is North Korea, almost literally in the dark ages. Same people, same language, same agricultural opportunities, same everything. But the consequences of atheistic Marxism destroyed and kept a nation in subservience, where people live in fear, and millions have died due to starvation, where South Korea is extraordinarily prosperous. The average South Korean makes 20 times the annual salary of the average North Korean. And these people are essentially related. They go back. I mean, if they can trace their lineage back before the 1940s, these are their cousins. They are the same people group, same intelligence, same everything, bad worldview. So ideas flow in patterns. Bad ideas result in bad patterns, and good ideas result in good patterns. Does this make sense so far? All right. So here's the term I wanted to give you, and then I'll just mention this briefly, talk about it briefly, and give you some things to think about. The term is worldview. I refer to a worldview as a pattern of ideas and beliefs, convictions, and habits. Why? Because ideas lead you to believe certain things. Strong beliefs are called convictions. Habits are the things you do, how you live based on those convictions. So a pattern that helps us make sense of God, the world, and our relationship to God and the world. At Summit Ministries, we teach students that there are essentially 6 different worldviews that are competing for their attention. There are, of course, more worldviews, more patterns of ideas than just 6. Some of them are kind of silly. A few years ago in Great Britain, people got to send in to the government what religion they were. What religion are you? That was part of their census. It was one of the census questions. And British people, Americans don't usually respond to questions like that. They say to the government, it's none of your business. They just throw the survey in the trash. Other people, they dutifully do whatever the government tells them to do. In Great Britain, they tried to trick the government. So they say, when the government asks you what religion you are, write in this. So 120-some thousand people, turns out, wrote in Jedi. They said, that is my religion. I am Jedi. 8,000 people said, I worship heavy metal music. But anyway, there are lots of patterns of ideas. We choose these 6 because when you're looking for patterns, you don't have to understand every single thing. These 6 ideas account for about 95% of the intellectual and public policy battles that we face in this country at this time. So we have Christianity, of course. I've already explained to you that I believe that Christianity is a worldview, that it gives us a rational, intelligent perspective in key areas of life. But Islam is also growing in influence. Islam says that there is a God, but that you only know God by his law. You follow his law. You don't know God personally. He does not love you. You are not his son or daughter. You are his slave. You just obey. Secularism says God belief is the problem with the world, that God is either irrelevant to what's really important or he is bad. Then you have Marxism as a worldview. Marxism says only the material world exists. There's only so much to go around. And so if every person is equally valuable, then we should share it all equally. So if you have more than another person, it's because you stole it. And you need to have that redistributed so that everybody can have their fair share, right? Adam's taught you about this in the Forge program. I'm almost positive about that. Another worldview that is deeply influential in the world in which we live today is what I call new spirituality. New spirituality is a belief that the world does not exist. It is an illusion. The material world is an illusion. Everything is actually spirit. If you ever saw the Marvel movie Doctor Strange, you saw the new spiritualist worldview on display. And then the final worldview is postmodernism. Postmodernists are skeptical of all of the others. They say, we doubt that anybody really knows the truth. And if anybody says they know the truth, then it's just going to result in mayhem and death. It's a real problem. If we just all quit believing that we know the truth, then the world will be better off. I'd love to know what of those 6 worldviews. I look at Christianity as the true worldview, and I look at these other 5, Islam, secularism, Marxism, new spirituality, and postmodernism, as what I call counterfeit worldviews. They have some of the truth, but they use that truth in the service of an overall lie. So should I just try to understand the patterns of a Christian worldview? And here's what I realized. No, I need to understand what other people believe. I need to understand the patterns of other ideas. If I could have 2 hours with you, we could go through these in detail, and I would make you a promise that you will never again read a social media post in the same way. You will never again listen to a song in the same way, watch a movie in the same way, or read a news item in the same way. Because you will realize that every single thing people say who aren't believers represents one of these 5 worldviews. Whenever everybody says, I think the rich should give more of their fair share, then they're coming from, they may not be Marxists, they're probably not communists, but they absolutely are operating from the patterns of a Marxist worldview. When anybody says, we are all one, we should all just get along, right? Or the Star Wars kind of thing. There's the light side of the force, the dark side of the force. Whenever people say things like that, they are representing a new spiritualist worldview. When anybody says, look, why would you pay attention to the Bible? That is an ancient book that is irrelevant to what is really going on. Then they represent a secularist worldview. If somebody, I've actually had, a number of Christians get tricked by this. We did a study of Christian young adults and we asked them a question from Islam. And the question was, the problem of society today is that people do not obey God and they should be forced to do so. And more than half of Christian young adults said, yes, that's my worldview. We should make them do it. We should force people into obedience. And that, of course, is an Islamic view of God, not a Christian view of God. But does that make sense? You can see these different worldviews and how they influence. So I want you to Google, you can do this right now, it's okay with me. You can Google Summit Worldview Chart. Just Google Summit Worldview Chart. And then you'll see, of course, some pictures pop up there. But the first entry should be Summit Ministries Worldview Chart. You see that? You can nod if you see it. Summit Ministries Worldview Chart. If you open it, it's a little booklet. And if you click on it, it's kind of a bluish green color. If you click on it and it opens, then you see a little introduction from me. Then you turn to the next page and you see a chart where these 6 worldviews, Christianity, Islam, secularism, Marxism, New Spirituality, and postmodernism, are compared in 10 key areas of life: theology, philosophy, ethics, biology, psychology, sociology, politics, law, economics, and history. In those 10 areas, you can examine the differences between these worldviews. So if you're wondering, I hear an economics idea and I'm not sure if it's really a Christian idea, you could look on this chart. And if you say, well, the term that is on that chart is not one I'm familiar with, then you just flip a few pages further back and there are definitions for each one of those key terms. That is a tool that I hope that you will find useful in identifying the source of bad ideas that you come up against. But what do you do differently? Let me just share briefly with you. At Summit Ministries, I want my students to be curious. And I can send the PowerPoints so that you can have those. You probably have already screen printed them though, that's fine. 5 conversation altering words. Tell me more about that. If one of your friends says, I believe that the government should provide health care to all. I believe the government should pay everybody's college tuition. And you want to say, no, that's terrible. It's a terrible idea. Let me give you an article to read. But first, just ask, tell me more about that. And then you can follow up with questions like these. What do you mean by that? What do you mean healthcare for all? Actually, what do you mean by healthcare? Because for some people, healthcare means complete coverage from cradle to grave. For other people, it just means free doctor's visits. What exactly do you mean by that? How did you arrive at that conclusion? Do you think that's the whole story, is a question I ask when I'm being challenged. When a professor says, only idiots would believe that the Bible is true. Well, do you think that's the whole story? Because I think I know quite a few people who are actually pretty intelligent and believe the Bible is true. It seems to go against your theory. How do you know that is true is a key question. What happens if you are wrong? So just by starting with those 5 conversation altering words, tell me more about that, you invite conversation rather than shut it down. And you say, well, why would we do that? Because let's leave it up to the leftists to shut all the conversations down. That's what happens when you go to college. Your leftist professor will, if you have any disagreement, your viewpoint will ultimately be shut down. We do not want to be known as people who shut down the conversation. We want to be known as people who invite the conversation. So tell me more about that, and then start asking these probing questions to dig into what the other person says. Very often, you'll see the flaws in their argument just because by asking these kinds of questions, you can begin to see the patterns of ideas that they're operating from. I'll close with this. At the end of the day, I believe, as C.S. Lewis said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. I want you to come study with us at Summit Ministries. And because some of our in-person programs are still on for this summer, but they're sold out. Other programs are having to be postponed because of coronavirus regulations, and we're kind of past that part of it, but a lot of parents, they vote with their dollars and they're a little reluctant. So we started something called Summit Virtual, which is a live, interactive, 5-day course of study in worldview and apologetics, where you get to personally meet with and ask questions of world-class Christian thought leaders, best-selling authors. We have celebrity guest appearances and things like that. It's very interactive. It's all live. And you'll have discussion groups and be able to really engage over the course of the week. If you go to summit.org/virtual, you can find out more information about that. Summit.org/virtual. And if you do join it for this summer, it costs about $500, but you can attend and earn up to 3 college credits for free. At the college where those come from, that's $1,875 in value. So if you're worrying that you're going to be bored this summer, armor up. Don't sit around. Get ready. to take a stand for what you believe and then earn some college credits while you're doing that. You will feel a lot better about yourself, and you'll actually be able to go into the fall in a little bit stronger of a position. So that's the end of what I had to say. Adam, I don't know what you'd like to do next. If you want to have questions, or if you just, or everybody's probably pretty wiped out. It's 10 o'clock and maybe we're ready to wrap up.
No, Jeff, thank you. That was great. And I want to have Maria ask a question.
Okay.
What is your favorite apologetics book or author that you would recommend for summer reading?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you an easy one. My book called Unquestioned Answers. And you can do that through an audiobook if you want. If you don't have an audible.com subscription, your first book on audible.com is free. So you can sign up for audible.com. You can get the book Unquestioned Answers. It's read by Michael Beck. He's the guy who reads the novels of John Grisham. You probably may be familiar with him as a novelist. So he's a great reader, and you could listen to that. You could listen to it while you're mowing the lawn or doing your chores or whatever you happen to do. Then the book I wish everybody was familiar with, written by one of our Summit Ministries authors, aside from the book I had the picture up there of that David Noble and I wrote called Understanding the Times, the one I wish everybody would have is Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell and Shaun McDowell. Josh McDowell and Shaun McDowell are teachers at our Summit Ministries programs. In fact, if you want to meet Shaun McDowell virtually and ask questions, you'll be significantly involved in the Summit virtual program that I mentioned.
And they just put out an updated version of that, didn't they?
They did. They just put out an updated version, Jeremiah, and it's really, really good. It's all great news sources, new information, new things that hadn't really been talked about when the original came out, and it is fantastic. It's one of those books that you just ought to have, like you have a dictionary or a thesaurus.
Thank you very much. Could you repeat the last title you mentioned? I was writing them down.
It's Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Thank you.
Jeff, thank you so much for spending this portion of your evening with us. We'll be in touch, and we're going to share the Summit virtual with all 300 of our alumni. Hopefully get a lot of folks hopping on there this summer, participating. And gosh, Summit Ministries and Forge, what a great summer combo, right?
I think it's a great summer combo. If you do the two together, then you learn the apologetics part of it and you learn the political part of it. It's really a good 1-2 punch. Well, I love you guys and what you're doing, and so proud of you and excited for you. I was hoping that this would be the summer where I could actually show up and see you in person. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but I can at least see your faces on the screen here and know that you're real people who are really, really working to make a real difference. And I just want you to know that I'm cheering for you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Likewise. And yeah, excited for the innovation that comes for all of our organizations as a result of this, and new ways to serve. So thanks so much. Please give Stephanie my best and the family. And yeah, appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right. Good night.
And students, we're thrilled that you were with us tonight. I mean, what a great evening this was. Maria, I see the corgi. We have a corgi, same color. Poor Jennie and Jeremiah probably expected barking to ensue over the phone. I've heard that there are clown corgis who just act adorable and cute and all that, but don't like bark all the time. Mine is not. Mine is a cop. She is like the ultimate police detective, everything, all the time. So.
Sorry, I had to pick him up. He was licking my toes. I couldn't take it anymore.
Dogs are welcome on Zoom anytime. And no, we appreciate all of you being here virtually, and look forward to meeting all of you this summer. We hope that all of you will apply. I mean, this is it for this evening, but there's more Forge programming, conference calls that we've recorded, other things that can help you prepare for the summer. And Jeremiah is going to tell you how you apply, because the great news is things are opening back up, and late July is still over 2 months away. So you're young, you're healthy, and we're going to have the Forge Summit. And I know a lot of you don't have an internship or a job that you had lined up anymore for that was going to start in May or June. So look, everything is opening right up for you to come to Forge. So Jeremiah is going to tell you how.
Yes, exactly. I was just about to say news even just today of things opening up in Ohio. We're incredibly excited. We're getting questions almost every day. Are we going to have the July Summit? Are we going to have the July Summit? We are moving forward as planned, and so some of you on the call have already applied. We're excited to see you in July. We're thrilled. As Adam mentioned earlier, we're going to have a copy of Jonathan Jakubowski's book, Bellwether Blues. Thanks to a generous supporter, we are sending that out to all applicants. And so if you've already applied, be expecting that. We're looking forward to seeing you. And if you haven't applied yet, you can just go to forgeleadership.org/apply. It has all the information. You fill out a quick form. It emails you a copy of the application. It's a quick PDF application, contact info, a couple essays. We want to learn a little bit more about you and kind of your worldview, to go back to worldview, and your conservative ideals. And we would love to have you at the summit, July 21st through 25th. We're running a few minutes late, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I definitely encourage everybody to go to forgeleadership.org/apply, request your application, fill out the PDF, submit it with a letter of recommendation. We'll get you accepted, and we'll get you a copy of Bellwether Blues in the mail as soon as possible. Many of you on this call I have been chatting with via email, Facebook, text. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat. And so if you have any questions, any concerns, anything at all, please feel free to reach out. I'll be the point of contact for student recruitment, and we just cannot wait to see you in July. If you enjoyed your experience tonight, then you will absolutely love the Forge Leadership Summit, July 21st through 25th. And as Adam mentioned, that's only the beginning. It opens up all the doors to the Mentorship Academy, trips to Washington, D.C., to Israel, to long-term job placement, mentorship, and networking. And I am an alumni. I'm a product of the program. Incredibly blessed to be a part of the team. And thank you so much for joining us here today.
And Jeremiah, I'm gonna end with one thought, right? So there's lots of options for your summer. We know you have lots of choices. There are conferences that are just conferences. They're great, but they're a one-off conference, right? There might be 5,000 people. There might be bells and whistles, all of that. Forge is different. Forge is going to invest in your life over the long haul. We're going to pour into a select few, and we're going to go to bat every day for you. So you've kind of seen a little bit of what we're like. You can hear from our alumni. You can look at their experiences, their testimonials. But we'd really love to serve you. It's literally why we exist, is to serve young conservatives like yourselves. And so thanks for being with us. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.